Chapter 1 of Book 4 of Physics by Aristotle. In like manner, it is necessary that the natural philosopher should know concerning place, as well as concerning the infinite, whether it is or not, and in what manner it is, and what it is. For all men conceive that beings are somewhere, since non-being is nowhere. For where is a herco cervus, or a sphinx? And that which is the most common and principal motion, which we call lation, subsists according to place. What place is, however, is attended with many doubts, for it does not appear to be the same to those who survey it from all its inherent properties. Beside, we have nothing transmitted to us by other philosophers, either as a doubt about place, or an explanation of its nature. Chapter 2. That there is such a thing, therefore, as place, appears to be evident from alternate mutation. For where water now is, here, on its departure, as from a vessel, air will again be contained. But sometimes some other body will occupy this very place. But this appears to be different from the things which enter into it and are changed. For in the place in which air now is, in this water was before. So that it is evident that there was a certain place and receptacle different from both, into which and from which they were changed. Again, the lations of natural and simple bodies, such as of fire, earth, and others of this kind, not only evince that there is a certain place, but also that it possesses a certain power; for each tends to its own place unless it is impeded, one body downward and another upward. But these are the parts and species of place, viz., upward and downward, and the remaining 6 intervals. Things of this kind, however, do not only subsist with relation to us, viz., the right hand and the left hand, upward and downward, for no one of these is always the same to us, but subsists according to position, as we happen to turn ourselves. Hence the same thing is frequently on the right and left hand, upward and downward, before and behind. But in nature each of these is separately defined, for not anything casual is upward, but that to which fire and a light body tend. In like manner, with respect to that which is downward, this is not the place of any casual thing, but it is that to which heavy and terrestrial things tend, as if these did not alone differ in position, but also in power. This also is manifested by mathematical entities, for these, not being in place, yet at the same time according to position with reference to us, they have the right hand and the left, so that the position of them is alone the object of intellection, in consequence of not possessing each of these from nature. Further still, those who say that there is a vacuum assert that there is place, for a vacuum will be a place deprived of body. That place, therefore, is something beside bodies, and that every sensible body is in place, may through these things be concluded. Hesiod also may seem to speak rightly when he makes chaos to be first, for he says, quote, chaos of all things was the first produced, and earth wide-bosomed next. Close quote. As if it were requisite that there should first be a receptacle for beings, because he thought with the many that all things are somewhere and in place. But if it is a thing of this kind, the power of place will be wonderful, and prior to all things. For that without which no one of other things subsists, but which can itself subsist without others, is necessarily the first. For place is not destroyed when the things which it contains are corrupted. Chapter 3. It is dubious, however, if place is what it is, whether it is a certain bulk of body, or some other nature. For in the first place its genus is to be investigated. It has therefore 3 intervals, length, breadth, and depth, by which every body is bounded. It is, however, impossible that place should be body, for if it were, there would be two bodies in the same. Again, if there is a place and receptacle of body, it is evident that there is also of superficies, and of the remaining boundaries, for the same reasoning applies to these. For where superficies of water were before, there will again be superficies of air. We have, however, no difference of a point and the place of a point, so that if place is here not different from the point, neither will it be different from any one of the others. Nor is place anything beside each of these. What, then, can we admit place to be? For possessing a nature of this kind, it can neither be an element, nor composed from elements, either corporeal or incorporeal. For it possesses indeed magnitude, but is not any body. But the elements of sensible bodies are bodies, and no magnitude is produced from intelligible elements. Further still, of what can any one admit place to be the cause of beings? For no one of the four causes is present with it. For it is neither as the matter of beings, since nothing has its subsistence from it, nor is it as the form and reason of things, nor as the end, nor does it move beings. Again, if place is any being, where will it be? For the doubt of Zeno investigates a certain reason. For if every being is in place, it is evident that there will be a place of place, and this will proceed to infinity. Further still, if as every body is in place, so also in every place there is body, what shall we say of things which are increased? For from what has been said, it is necessary that the place of them should be at the same time increased, if place is neither less nor greater than each of the things which it contains. Hence, therefore, it is necessary not only to doubt what place is, but also if it is. Chapter 4. But since one thing is predicated essentially, and another according to something else, with respect to place also, one is common in which all bodies are contained, but another proper in which anything primarily subsists. I mean, for instance, you are now in the universe because you are in the air, and this is in the universe. You are also in air because you are in the earth, and in a similar manner you are in the earth because you are in this particular place, which comprehends nothing more than yourself. If, therefore, place is that which first comprehends each body, it will be a boundary, so that place would appear to be the form and morphe of each thing by which magnitude is bounded and the matter of magnitude, for this is the boundary of each. To those, therefore, who thus consider the affair, place is the form of each of the things which it contains. So far, however, as place appears to be the interval of magnitude, it is rather matter. For this is different from magnitude, and this is that which is comprehended and bounded by form, as by a superficies and limit. But matter and the indefinite are of this kind. For when the boundary and the passive qualities of the sphere are taken away, nothing remains except matter. Hence also Plato in the Timaeus says that matter and a receptacle are the same thing. For that which is capable of receiving and a receptacle are one and the same thing. But though he there speaks of that which is capable of receiving in a different manner from what he says of it, in what are called his unwritten dogmas, yet at the same time he asserts place and a receptacle to be the same. For all philosophers affirm that place is something, but Plato alone has attempted to say what it is. Hence, from these things it may reasonably appear to be difficult to those who consider the affair to know what place is, if it is either of these, viz., matter or form, to which it may be added that these two are attended with the highest speculation, and, separate from each other, cannot easily be known. It is not, however, difficult to see that it is impossible for either of these to be place. For form and matter are not separated from the thing, but place may be separated from it. For in that in which there was air, water, as we have said, again enters, water and air alternately succeeding each other, and in a similar manner with respect to other bodies, so that place is neither a part nor a habit, but is separate from each particular thing. For place appears to be a thing of such a kind as a vessel, since a vessel is a place which may be transferred, and a vessel is not anything belonging to that which it contains. So far, therefore, as place is separate from the thing which it receives, so far it is not form, and so far as it comprehends, so far it is different from matter. But being always appears to be somewhere, and to be itself something, and it always seems that external to there is something different from it. We must, however, ask Plato, if it be necessary to digress, why forms and numbers are not in place, if place is capable of participating, whether that which can participate is the great and the small, or whether it be matter, as he has written in the Timaeus. Again, how could a thing be carried to its own place, if place were matter or form? For it is impossible that place should be that of which there is no motion, nor upward or downward, so that place must be investigated in things of this kind. But if place is in the thing itself, for it is necessary that it should if it were form or matter, place will be in place, for it will be changed and moved together with the thing. Form also and the indefinite are not always in the same place, but are there where the thing is, so that there will be a place of place. Further still, when water is produced from air, place would perish, for the body which is generated is not in the same place. What then is the corruption? And thus we have shown from what arguments it is necessary that place should be something, and again, from what some one may doubt concerning its essence. Chapter 5. In the next place, let us consider in how many ways one thing is in another. In one way, then, as a finger in the hand, and in short, as a part in the whole. In another way, as the whole in the parts, for the whole is not without the parts. In another way, as man in animal, and in short, as a species in genus. In another way, as genus in a species, and in short, as a part of species in the definition of species. Again, one thing is in another, as health in things hot and cold, and in short, as form in matter. Further still, as the affairs of Greece in the king, and in short, as that which is in the first mover. Again, as in the good, and in short, as in the end. But this is that for the sake of which a thing subsists. But one thing is in another in the most proper way of all, when it is as in a vessel, and in short, as in place. It may, however, be doubted whether one and the same thing can be in itself, or nothing can, but all things are either nowhere or in another. But this is twofold, viz., either essentially or with reference to something else. For when both that in which a thing is inherent, and that which is inherent in this thing are parts of the whole, then the whole is said to be in itself. For it is said to be so with reference to the parts. Thus a thing is white because the superficies is white, and man possesses scientific knowledge because the reasoning power is scientific. Neither the vessel, therefore, nor the wine will be in itself, but the vessel will be the vessel of the wine, for both that which is inherent and that in which it is inherent are parts of the same. Thus, therefore, it may happen that the same thing may be in itself. Primarily, however, this is not possible. Thus, for instance, the white is in body, for superficies is in body, but science is in the soul. According to these, however, being parts, the appellations are assumed, so that they are said to be in man. But the amphora and the wine being separate are not parts, but taken together they are parts. Hence, when they are parts, the same thing will be in itself; as, for instance, the white is in man, because it is in body, and in this, because it is in superficies; but it is in this no longer through another. And these are different in species, and superficies and whiteness possess a different nature and power. Neither, therefore, if we consider the affair by induction, shall we see that anything is in itself according to any definition. And reason indeed shows that this is impossible. For it would be requisite that each should be both; as, for instance, that the amphora should be the vessel and the wine, and the wine and the amphora, if it be possible for any thing to be in itself. So that if they were especially in each other, yet the amphora would receive the wine, not so far as it is the wine, but so far as it is the amphora; but the wine will be in the amphora, not so far as it is the amphora, but so far as that in which it is the amphora. That these, therefore, are different according to essence is manifest. For there is one definition of that in which a thing is, and another of that which is in this. Beside, neither is this possible according to accident. For two bodies would be at the same time in the same thing, since the amphora will be in itself, if that which is naturally a recipient can be in itself. And further still, that which it is capable of receiving will be in the same; as, for instance, wine, if it is capable of receiving wine. That it is impossible, therefore, for anything to be primarily in itself is manifest. But the doubt of Zeno, that if place is anything, it will be in something, it is not difficult to solve. For nothing hinders the first place from being in something else. Yet, just in the same manner as health is in hot things as a habit, but heat is in the body as a passion, so that it is not necessary to proceed to infinity. This, however, is evident, that since the vessel is not any part of that which is in it, for that which is primarily inherent and that in which are different, place will neither be matter nor form, but something different from either; for these things, viz., matter and form, are something belonging to that which is inherent. Let these, therefore, be the doubts. Chapter 6. What, however, place is will become evident as follows. But let us admit concerning it such things as appear to be truly present with it essentially. First, then, we should think that place comprehends that of which it is the place, and that it is not anything of that which it contains. And again, that the first place is neither less nor greater than the thing contained in it, and also that it does not desert each particular thing, and is not separable from it. Beside this, we should think that every place has upward and downward, and that every body naturally tends to and abides in its proper place, and that it does this either upward or downward. These things being admitted, let us survey what remains. But it is necessary that we should endeavour so to conduct the speculation that what place is may be unfolded, so that the doubts may be solved, and the things which appear to be present with place may remain; and beside this, that the cause of the difficulty and of the doubts about it may be manifest, for thus each particular will be exhibited in the most beautiful manner. In the first place, therefore, it is necessary to understand that place could not be investigated unless there were some motion according to place. For on this account we especially conceive that the heavens are in place, because they are always in motion. But of this motion one kind is lation, and another increase and diminution. For a change takes place in increase and diminution, and that which was formerly here is again transferred into the less or the greater. But with respect to things which are moved, some are essentially in energy, and others according to accident. And of those which are according to accident, some can be moved essentially, as for instance the parts of the body and the helm in a ship, but others cannot be so moved, but are always moved accidentally, as for instance whiteness and science. For these thus change their place, because that changes in which they subsist. But as we say that a thing is in the heavens as in place, because it is in air, and air is in the heavens, so we say that a thing is in air, that is, not in the whole of air, but on account of its extremity, and that which comprehends, we say that a thing is in air. For if the whole of air were place, the place of each particular thing, and each particular thing itself, would not be equal. They appear, however, to be equal, and such is the first place in which a thing subsists. When, therefore, that which contains is not divided, but continued, then a thing is said to be in it, not as in place, but as a part in the whole. But when it is divided and touches, then it is in a certain first, which is the extremity of that which contains, and which is neither a part of the thing contained, nor greater than the interval, but equal to it. For the extremities of things that touch are in the same. And that which is continued is not indeed moved in, but together with it. But that which is divided is moved in it. And whether that which contains is moved, or whether it is not the less moved. Further still, when it is not divided, it is said to be as a part in the whole, as for instance sight in the eye, or the hand in the body. But when it is divided or touches, it is said to be as in place, as for instance water in a wine vessel, or wine in an earthen vessel. For the hand is moved together with the body, and the water in the wine vessel. Hence, therefore, it is now evident what place is, for there are nearly 4 things of which it is necessary place should be one. For it is either form, or matter, or a certain interval between the extremes of a thing, or the extremes if there is no interval beside the magnitude of the inherent body. But of these it is evident that 3 cannot be place. Through containing indeed it appears to be form, for the extremes of that which contains, and of that which is contained, are in the same. Both therefore are boundaries, yet not of the same thing, but form is the boundary of the thing contained, but place of the containing body. In consequence, however, of that being frequently changed which is contained and divided, while that which contains remains, as water from a vessel, that which is between appears to be a certain interval, as if that which is changed were something beside body. But this is not the case. But any body whatever departs among those that are transferred, and are naturally adapted to touch. If, however, there were any interval which is naturally adapted to abide in the same place, there would be infinite places, for water and air being transferred, all the parts affect the same thing in the whole, as all the water in the vessel. At the same time, too, the place will be changed, so that there will be another place of place, and there will be many places together. There is not, however, another place of the part in which it can be moved, when the whole vessel is transferred, but the same place. For in that place in which they are contained, air and water, and the parts of water, are alternately transferred, and not in that place into which they pass, and which is a part of the place, that is the place of the whole heaven. Matter also may appear to be place if any one directs his attention to that which is at rest, and is not separated, but continued. For just as if matter is changed in quality, something which is now white was formerly black, and that which is now hard was formerly soft, on which account we say that matter is something. Thus also place appears to be something, through a phantasy of this kind. Except, however, that in the instance of water and air, this is said to be the case, because that which was air is now water, but in place, because where there was air there is now water. But matter, as was before observed, is neither separable from the thing, nor does it contain, both which are the properties of place. If, therefore, place is no one of the three, viz., if it is neither form, nor matter, nor interval, in consequence of always being something different from the thing which is transferred, place must necessarily be that which remains of the four, viz., it must be the boundary of the containing body. But I call the containing body that which is movable according to local motion. It appears, however, to be something great and difficult to apprehend what place is, both through its appearing to be at the same time matter and form, and through the transition of that which is borne along being affected in that which contains when at rest. For it appears that there may be a certain interval between, different from the magnitudes which are moved. The air also contributes something which seems to be incorporeal. For place appears to be not only the extremities of a vessel, but also that which subsists between as a vacuum. As, however, a vessel is a place which may be transferred, so place is an immovable vessel. Hence, when anything is moved in that which is moved, that also which is within changes its place, just as a ship in a river, so that it uses that which contains rather as a vessel than as place. But place wishes to be something immovable, and hence the whole river is rather place, because the whole is immovable, so that the first immovable boundary of that which contains is place. Chapter 7. And on this account the middle of the heavens and the extremity of the circular motion which is toward us appear to be especially common to all things, this above and that beneath, because the one always abides, and the extremity of the circle also abides, possessing a sameness of subsistence. Hence, since that which is light is naturally carried upward, and that which is heavy downward, the comprehending boundary which is toward the middle, and also the middle itself, are downward. But the containing boundary which is toward the extremity, and the extremity itself, are upward. On this account place appears to be a superficies, and as it were a vessel and that which contains. Further still, place in a certain respect subsists together with the thing which it contains, for boundaries subsist together with that which is bounded. Hence that body is in place, beyond which there is some other body that contains it, but that is not in place, beyond which there is no such body. On this account, though water should become a thing of this kind, yet the parts of it will be moved, for they are comprehended by each other. But the universe in a certain respect will be moved, and in a certain respect not. For so far as it is the whole, at the same time it will not change its place, but it will be moved in a circle, for this is the place of the parts. And some things indeed will not be moved upward and downward, but in a circle, but others, viz., such as have rarity and density, will be moved upward and downward. As we have said, however, some things are in place according to capacity, but others according to energy. On this account, when that which is of similar parts is continued, the parts are in place according to capacity, but when they are separate and touch like a heap, then they are in place according to energy. And some things indeed are in place essentially, as for instance every body which is movable, either according to lation or according to increase, is essentially somewhere. But heaven, i.e. the universe, is not, as we have said, anywhere totally, nor in one certain place, since no body comprehends it, but so far as it is moved, so far its parts are in place, for one part adheres to another. But other things are in place accidentally, as for instance soul and the universe, for all the parts are in a certain respect in place, since in a circle one part comprehends another. Hence the upward body alone is moved in a circle, but the universe is not anywhere. For somewhere is itself something, and it is necessary that there should be something else in which this somewhere is, and which contains it. But beside the universe and the whole there is nothing external to the universe. Hence all things are contained in the heaven, for the heaven is perhaps the universe. But place is not the heaven, but a certain extremity of the heaven, and a quiescent boundary which touches the movable body. Hence the earth is in water, this in air, and air in ether. Ether is in the heaven, but heaven is no longer in anything else. But from these things it is evident that this explanation of place being admitted, all the doubts may be solved. For neither is it necessary that place should be co-increased, nor that there should be a place of a point, nor that two bodies should be in the same place, nor that there should be any corporeal interval. For that which is between place is any casual body, and not an interval of body. Place also is somewhere, yet not as in place, but as bound in the thing bounded. For not every being is in place, but only movable body. Everything, therefore, tends to its own place in a becoming manner. For that which is next in order and touches, but not by violence, is of a kindred nature, and being connascent indeed, they are impassive, but when they come into contact they are mutually passive and active. Hence everything naturally abides in its proper place, not irrationally, for this particular part has the same ratio to the whole place as a divided part to the whole, as for instance when any one moves a portion of water or air. Thus also is air to water, for this is as matter, but that as form. Water indeed is the matter of air, but air is as it were a certain energy of water, for water is air in capacity, but air is after another manner water in capacity. Afterward, however, we shall determine concerning these things, but the occasion rendered it necessary to speak about them at present, and what has now been obscurely said will be then more perspicuous. If, therefore, the same thing is matter and energy, for water is both, but is one in capacity and the other in energy, it will subsist in a certain respect as a part to the whole. Hence also in these there is contact, but there is a coherence when both become one in energy. And concerning place indeed, that it is, and what it is, has been said. End of chapter 7 of book 4. Chapter 8. After this same manner we must conceive that it is the business of a natural philosopher to speculate concerning a vacuum, whether it is or not, and how it subsists, or what it is, just as concerning place, for it is attended with similar incredibility, and the belief in it is derived from the conceptions about it. For those who assert that there is a vacuum consider it as if it were a certain place and vessel, and it appears indeed to be full when it possesses the bulk which it is capable of receiving, but when it is deprived of this it is void, as if a vacuum, plenum, and place were the same, but their essence not the same. It is necessary, however, to begin the speculation, assuming the assertions of those who say that there is a vacuum, and again of those who deny its existence. And in the third place, we must consider common opinions concerning them. Those, therefore, who endeavour to show that there is not a vacuum, do not refute that which men wish to call a vacuum, but that which they erroneously assert, as Anaxagoras and others, who confute after this manner. For they demonstrate that air is something by twisting bladders, showing how strong the air is, and receiving it in clepsydra. But men conceive that a vacuum is an interval in which there is no sensible body, and fancying that all being is body, they say that is a vacuum in which, in short, there is nothing, and on this account, that what is full of air is a vacuum. Hence it is not necessary to demonstrate that air is something, but that there is not an interval different from and separate from bodies, and that it is not in energy, and does not pervade through every body, so that it is not continuous, as Democritus and Leucippus say, and many other physiologists, and that it is not anything beyond all body, since body is continuous. These, therefore, do not meet the problem through the gate, but rather those who say that there is a vacuum. But one thing, indeed, which they say is this, that if there is not a vacuum, there will not be local motion, and this is lation and increase, for motion would not appear to subsist unless there were a vacuum, since that which is full cannot receive. And if it could receive, there would be two bodies in the same thing. Certainly, on this hypothesis, any number of bodies whatever may subsist together, for the difference cannot be adduced through which that which is asserted will not take place. But if this be possible, the smallest may receive the greatest thing, for that which is great is many small things, so that if many equal things may be in the same thing, this also may be the case with many unequal things. Melissus, therefore, shows from these things that the universe is immovable, for if it were moved, it would be necessary, says he, that there should be a vacuum, but a vacuum does not rank among beings. In one way, therefore, they thus show that there is a certain void, but in another way, because some things appear to come together and to be compressed, just as they say that wine is received by tubs, together with bladders, as if the condensed body would enter into the inherent void spaces. Again, increase likewise appears to all men to be effected through a vacuum, for nutriment is a body, and it is impossible for two bodies to subsist together. They also adduce as an evidence that which happens about ashes, which receive as much water as a void vessel. The Pythagoreans also say that there is a vacuum, and that it enters into the heaven, as if the heaven respired from an infinite spirit. They likewise assert that a vacuum is that which distinguishes natures, as if a vacuum were a certain separation and distinction of things in a consequent order, and that this first subsists in numbers, since a vacuum gives distinction to their nature. So many, therefore, and such are nearly the arguments from which some assert and others deny the existence of a vacuum. Chapter 9. In order, however, to understand which of the assertions are true, it is necessary to consider what the name signifies. A vacuum, therefore, appears to be a place in which there is nothing, but the cause of this is that they fancied being to be body, but every body is in place, and in the place in which there is no body, there is a vacuum, so that if anywhere there is no body, there is a vacuum. Again, they fancied that every body is tangible, and that whatever has gravity or levity is a thing of this kind. From syllogism, therefore, it happens that a vacuum is that in which there is nothing heavy or light. These things, therefore, as we have also before observed, are syllogistically inferred. But it is absurd that a point should be a vacuum, for it is necessary that a vacuum should be a place in which there is an interval of tangible body. A vacuum, however, appears in one way to be called that which is not full of a sensible tangible body, and that which possesses gravity and levity is sensible according to the touch. Hence some one may doubt if interval had colour or sound, whether it would be a vacuum or not. Or is it not manifest that if it could receive a tangible body, it would be a vacuum, but if not, that it would not be a vacuum? But after another manner, a vacuum is said to be that in which there is not this particular thing, nor any corporeal essence. Hence some say that a vacuum is the matter of bodies, who also say, though not rightly, that this very thing is place. For matter is not separate from bodies, but they investigate a vacuum as that which is separate. Chapter 10. Since, therefore, we have sufficiently discussed the nature of place, and it is necessary that a vacuum, if it has a subsistence, should be place deprived of body, and we have shown how place subsists, and how it does not subsist, this being the case, it is evident that a vacuum does not thus subsist, neither considered as separate nor as inseparable, for a vacuum cannot be a body, but an interval of body. On this account, a vacuum appears to be something, because place also appears to be so, and through the same causes. For those also direct their attention to motion according to place who say that place and a vacuum are something beside the bodies that fall into them. But they fancy that a vacuum is the cause of motion in the same manner as that in which a thing is moved, and this resembles what some assert of place. There is not, however, any necessity that if there is motion there should be a vacuum. And in short, a vacuum can by no means be the cause of every motion, for that reason which was concealed from Melissos. For a plenum may be changed according to quality. But neither is it necessary that there should be motion according to place on account of a vacuum. For bodies which are moved may yield to each other when there is no separate interval beside them. And this also is manifest in the revolutions of things continuous, as likewise in the revolutions of human natures. Bodies, too, may be condensed, not into a vacuum, but because the things inherent are expelled. Thus water being compressed, the inherent air is expelled. Things likewise may be increased, not only from the ingress of some body, but also by a change in quality, as if air should be generated from water. And in short, the reason concerning increase and that of water poured upon ashes are respectively impediments to themselves. For either anything whatever is not increased, or it is not increased by body, or two bodies may be in the same place. They think fit, therefore, to solve the common doubt, but they do not demonstrate that there is a vacuum, or it is necessary that all bodies should be a vacuum, if it is every way increased, and is increased through a vacuum. The same reasoning also applies to ashes. That the arguments, therefore, from which they show that there is a vacuum may be easily solved, is evident. Chapter 11. Again, however, we shall say that there is not a vacuum so separate as some assert it to be. For if there is a certain natural relation to each of the simple bodies, as for instance to fire upward, but to earth downward, and toward the middle, it is evident that a vacuum will not be the cause of lation. Of what, then, will a vacuum be the cause? For it appears to be the cause of motion according to place, and yet is not the cause of this. Further still, if it is anything, as for instance a place deprived of body, whither will the body placed in it be impelled? For it will not be impelled in all directions. The same reasoning also may be urged against those who fancy that place is something separate into which that is carried which is borne along. For how will that which is in this be either impelled or abide? And the same reasoning will fitly accord to upward and downward, and to a vacuum, for those who say there is a vacuum make it to be place. How, therefore, will body be in place, or in a vacuum? For this cannot happen, since the whole of some body is considered as being in a separate and permanent place. For a part of such a body, unless it is considered separately, will not be in place, but in the whole. Again, if place is not separate from body, neither will a vacuum. But to him who considers this affair, it will appear that the contrary rather happens to those who say there is a vacuum, as if this were necessary if there is motion. I mean that nothing can be moved if there is a vacuum. For just as those who say that the earth is at rest through similitude, so likewise it is necessary to be at rest in a vacuum. For there is not any place in it where a thing can be more or less moved, since so far as it is a vacuum, it has not any difference. In the first place, therefore, because every motion is either from violence or according to nature, it is necessary, if there is violent, that there should also be natural motion. For violent motion is contrary to nature, and that which is contrary to nature is posterior to that which is according to nature, so that if motion according to nature is not present with every natural body, neither will any one of the other motions be present. Beside, how will it be natural, since there is no difference in a vacuum and the infinite? For so far as it is infinite, there will be no downward, nor upward, nor middle. But so far as it is a vacuum, there will be no difference between the downward and upward. For as there is no difference in nothing, so neither is there in nonentity. But a vacuum appears to be a certain nonentity and privation. Natural relation, however, is different, so that things which are naturally moved will be different. Either, therefore, there will not be anywhere a natural relation to anything, or if there is not a vacuum. Further still, things which are thrown are now moved. He who impels them, not touching them, either through an antiperistasis, as some say, or because the air, being impelled, impels with a swifter motion than that of the lation of the impelled body, through which it tends to its proper place. But in a vacuum there can be nothing of this kind, nor can anything be borne along, unless as that which is carried. Again, no one can assign a reason why that which is in motion stops somewhere, for why should it rather stop here than there? So that either it will be at rest, or it is necessary that it should be borne along to infinity, unless something more powerful impedes. Further still, now it seems to be carried to a vacuum because it yields, but in a vacuum a thing of this kind is similarly every way, so that it will be every way impelled. Again, what is said will be evident from the following considerations. We see the same weight and body more swiftly borne along, through two causes, either because there is a difference in that through which it is borne along, as when it moves through water, or earth, or air, or because that which is borne along differs, if other things remain the same, through excess of weight or levity. Hence, that through which it is borne along is the cause that it impedes, especially if it is borne in a contrary direction, and in the next place if it abides. But this is more especially the case with that which is not easily divided, and that which is more dense is a thing of this kind. Let the weight A, therefore, be impelled through B in the time G, but through D, which is more attenuated in the time E, if the length of B is equal to that of D, according to the proportion of the impeding body. For let B be water, but D air. By how much the more attenuated, therefore, and incorporeal air is than water, by so much swifter will A be impelled through D than through B. It will, therefore, have the same ratio of celerity to celerity as air to water, so that if it is doubly more attenuated, it will pass through the space B in double the time that it will pass through D, and the time G will be double the time E. And thus always, by how much the more incorporeal that is through which it passes, and by how much less it impedes, and may be more easily divided, by so much the more swiftly will it be impelled. But a vacuum has no ratio by which it may be surpassed by body, just as nothing has no ratio to number. For if 4 surpasses 3 by 1, but 2 by more than 1, and 1 by still more than it surpasses 2, there will no longer be any ratio by which it surpasses nothing. For it is necessary that what surpasses should be divided into excess, and that which is exceeded, so that 4 will be divided into 4 and nothing. Hence, neither can a line surpass a point, unless it were composed from points. In like manner, neither can a vacuum have any ratio to a plenum, and therefore neither the motion through the one to the motion through the other. But if a weight passes through so much space in such time, through a most attenuated medium, in passing through a vacuum it will exceed every ratio. For let Z be a vacuum equal to the magnitudes B and D. If therefore it passes through A, and is moved in a certain time, viz. In the time E, which is less than the time F, the vacuum also will have this ratio to the plenum. But in as much time as E, the weight, A will pass through G, a part of D, but it will also pass through it, even if there should be something in Z different in subtlety from air, in the same proportion as the time E to the time F. For if the body in Z is as much more attenuated than D, as the time E surpasses the time F, vice versa, the weight A, if it is borne along, will pass through Z with a celerity measured by the time F. If, therefore, there is no body in Z, it will pass through it with still greater celerity, but it was in the time F, so that in an equal time it will pass through a plenum and a vacuum. This, however, is impossible. It is evident, therefore, that if there should be any time in which anything whatever is impelled through a vacuum, this impossibility would happen. For let it be assumed that anything will pass through a plenum and a vacuum in an equal time, then there will be some body having the same ratio to another as time to time. And to sum up the whole in a few words, the cause of that which happens is manifest, viz. That there is a ratio of every motion to every motion, for it is in time, but there is a ratio of every time to every time, both being finite. But there is no ratio of a vacuum to a plenum. These things, therefore, happen so far as the media differ through which they are moved, but these according to the excess of the things which are moved. For we see that things which have a greater momentum, either of weight or levity, if in other respects they possess similar figures, are more swiftly carried through an equal space, and that according to the ratio which the magnitudes have to each other, so that this also will be the case in passing through a vacuum. But this is impossible, for through what cause will it be more swiftly impelled? For in a plenum this necessarily happens, since that which is greater more swiftly divides by its force, and that which is borne along or thrown either divides by its figure or by the momentum which it possesses. All things, therefore, will be moved with equal swiftness, but this is impossible. From what has been said, therefore, it is evident that if there is a vacuum, the contrary will happen to that through which those who say there is a vacuum endeavour to prove its existence. For these fancy there is a vacuum, separate and per se, if there is motion according to place. But this is just the same as to say that there is a certain separate place, and that this is impossible has been already shown. Chapter 12. To those also who consider the affair by itself, it will appear that what is called a vacuum is truly a vacuum. For just as if any one puts a cube into water, as much water will give way as is equal to the cube. The like also happens in air, though it is immanifest to sense. Hence, in every body which may be transferred, so far as it is naturally adapted to be transferred, it is necessary, unless it is compressed, that it should be transferred either always downward, if its lation is downward as earth, or upward, if it is fire, or toward both, as air, or of whatever kind the thing may be which is locally situated. In a vacuum, however, this is impossible, for neither is it a body. But through the cube an equal interval may appear to permeate, which was before in a vacuum, just as if neither the water nor the air should yield to the wooden cube, but should permeate it throughout. The cube, however, has as much magnitude as the vacuum contains, which, if it should also be hot or cold, or heavy or light, would be no less, but would even be more essentially different from all passive qualities, although it is not separate from them. I mean the bulk of the wooden cube. So that though it should be separated from all other things, and should neither be heavy nor light, yet it would occupy an equal vacuum, and would be in the same part of a place and a vacuum equal to itself. In what, therefore, will the body of the cube differ from an equal vacuum and place? And if there are two of this kind, why will not also anything whatever be in the same? This, therefore, is one absurdity and impossibility. Further still, it is evident that the cube, when transferred to another place, will have this, a triple dimension, which all other bodies have. So that if it in no respect differs from place, why is it necessary to make a place for bodies, beside the bulk of each, if bulk is impassive? For it contributes nothing, if another equal interval of this kind should be about it. Again, it is necessary that the quality of the vacuum, which is in things that are moved, should be manifest. But now it nowhere appears within the world. For air is something, but it does not seem to be a body. Neither would water appear to be a body if fishes were made of iron. For the judgment of that which is tangible is by the touch. Hence, therefore, it is manifest that there is not a separate vacuum. Chapter 13. There are some, however, who fancy that it is evident there is a vacuum from the rare and the dense. For if there is not the rare and the dense, it is not possible for things to come together and be compressed. And if this does not take place, either in short there will not be motion, or the universe will overflow, as Xuthus said, or air and water will always be changed into the equal. I say, for instance, if air should be generated from a cup of water, at the same time as much water must be generated from equal air, or there must necessarily be a vacuum. For it is not otherwise possible that compression and coextension can exist. If, therefore, they call the rare that which has many void separate spaces, it is evident that if there cannot be a separate vacuum, as neither is there a place which has an interval of itself, neither can the rare subsist in this manner. But if they say that there is not a separate vacuum, but that at the same time a vacuum is inherent, this indeed is less impossible. It will happen, however, in the first place, that a vacuum is not the cause of all motion, but only of that which is upward. For the rare is light, and on this account they say that fire is rare. In the next place, a vacuum will not be the cause of motion, as that in which, but just as bladders, because they are carried upward, carry also that which adheres to them, in like manner a vacuum will have a power of carrying upward. But how is it possible that there can be lation of a vacuum, or a place of a vacuum? For there would be a vacuum of a vacuum, into which it would be carried. Again, how can they assign the cause why a heavy body tends downward? And it is manifest, if by how much the more rare a body is, and contains void spaces, by so much the more it will be impelled upward, so that if, in short, there is a vacuum, it will be most rapidly moved. Perhaps, however, it is impossible for a vacuum to be moved, and the reason is the same, because as in a vacuum all things are immovable, so likewise a vacuum is immovable. For the celerities of a vacuum and a solid cannot be compared with each other. Since, however, we say that there is not a vacuum, and it is truly doubted of the rest, hence either there will not be motion unless there is condensation and rarefaction, or the universe will overflow, or there will always be an equal quantity of water from air and of air from water. For it is evident that more air will be produced from water. It is necessary, therefore, unless there is compression, or that which adheres is expelled, that what is last must be made to overflow, or an equal quantity of air must in some other place be changed into water, in order that the whole bulk of the universe may be equal. Or if this be not admitted, it will follow that nothing can be moved. For some body being always transferred, this will happen unless it revolves in a circle. But lation is not always in a circle, but likewise in a right line. These, therefore, through arguments of this kind, assert that there is a vacuum. We, however, say, from the things which are admitted, that there is one matter of contraries, viz. Of the hot and the cold, and of other contrarieties. Also, that from what is in capacity, that which is in energy is produced. That matter is not separate, but is different in essence, and that the matter, for instance, of colour, of the hot and of the cold, is one in number. The matter also of body, of the great and of the small, is the same. But this is manifest. For when air is generated from water, the same matter, not assuming anything else, is produced, but that which was in capacity becomes in energy. And again, in like manner, water is generated from air, a change being made at one time into magnitude from parvitude, and at another from parvitude into magnitude. In a similar manner, therefore, if air passes from a greater into a less quantity, and from a less into a greater, the matter which is in capacity becomes both. For as the same matter from being cold becomes hot, and from being hot cold, because it was in capacity, so likewise from being hot it becomes more hot. No part of the matter being made hot which was not hot before, when there was less heat. Just as if the circumference and convexity of a greater circle should become the circumference of a less, whether it be the same or another, the convexity would not be in any part which was not convex, but straight, for it is not less or more by intermission. Nor can any magnitude of flame be assumed in which both whiteness and heat are not inherent. Thus, therefore, is the prior heat with reference to the posterior, so that the magnitude and parvitude of the sensible bulk is extended, the matter not assuming anything, but because the matter is in capacity to both. Hence the same thing is both dense and rare, and there is one matter of these. The dense also is heavy, but the rare light, for there are two things in each, that is, in the rare and the dense. For the heavy and the hard appear to be dense, and the contraries appear to be rare, viz. The light and the soft. But the heavy and the hard are discordant in lead and iron. From what has been said, therefore, it is evident that there is not a separate vacuum, whether simply considered, or as in that which is rare, nor a vacuum in capacity, unless some one, in short, should be willing to call a vacuum that which is the cause of lation. But thus the matter of the heavy and light, so far as it is such, will be that vacuum. For the dense and the rare, according to this contrariety, are effective of lation, but according to the hard and the soft, they have the power of producing passion and impassivity, and not lation, but rather change according to quality. After this manner, therefore, let it be determined concerning a vacuum how it subsists, and how it does not subsist. End of chapter 13 of Book 4. Chapter 14. It now remains, as consequent to what has been said, that we should speak concerning time. In the first place, then, it will be well to doubt concerning it, through exoteric reasons, whether it ranks among beings or among nonentities, and in the next place to consider what its nature is. That time, therefore, in short, is not, or that it scarcely and obscurely is, may be suspected from the following considerations. One part of it was, and is not. Another part is future, and is not yet, but from these parts, infinite time, and which is always assumed, is composed. That, however, which is composed from things that are not, does not appear to be ever capable of participating of essence; to which may be added, it is necessary, with respect to everything partible, if it should have a subsistence, that either some or all of its parts should be when it is. But of time, some of the parts are past, others are future, and no part is, in consequence of time being divisible. But the now, or an instant, is not a part of time; for a part measures, and it is necessary that the whole should be composed from the parts; but time does not appear to be composed from instants. Besides, with respect to this now, which appears to bound and separate the past and the future, whether it always remains one and the same, or is another and another, it is not easy to see. For if it is always another and another, but there is no part of time which is at once another and another, and of which one part does not comprehend, and another is comprehended, just as the less is comprehended by the greater time, but that which now is not, but was before, must necessarily once have perished. If this be the case, instants cannot subsist together with each other, but the prior instant must always have necessarily perished. It is not possible, therefore, that it can have perished in itself because it then is. Neither is it possible that a prior now can perish in another now. For let it be impossible for instants to adhere to each other in the same manner as it is impossible for a point to adhere to a point. If, therefore, it does not perish in that which is successive, but in another, it will at one and the same time be in the intermediate instants which are infinite. But this is impossible. Neither is it possible for the same instant always to remain, for there is not one boundary of any finite divisible thing; neither if it should be continuous to one thing, nor if to many. But the now is a boundary, and a finite time may be assumed. Again, if a simultaneous subsistence according to time, and to be neither prior nor posterior, is nothing else than to be in the same, and in an instant, in this case, if those things which are prior and posterior are in the same now, the transactions of 1,000 years past will subsist together with those which are accomplished today, and one thing will not be prior or posterior to another. Such, then, are the doubts concerning the particulars which belong to time. Chapter 15. But what time is, and what is its nature, from what has been delivered, is similarly immanifest with the things which we have before discussed. For some say that it is the motion of the universe, but others that it is the sphere itself. A part, however, of the revolution of the universe is a certain time, but it is not a revolution, for that which is assumed is a part of the revolution, and not the revolution. Again, if there were many heavens, time would be similarly the motion of any one of these, so that there would be many times subsisting together. But the sphere of the universe seemed to those who made that assertion to be time, because all things are in time and in the sphere of the universe. This assertion, however, is so stupid that it is not requisite to consider the impossibilities with which it is attended. But since time especially appears to be motion and mutation, this must be considered. The mutation, therefore, and motion of everything is in that alone which is changed, or wherever that may be which is moved and changed. But time is similarly everywhere, and with all things. Besides, every mutation is swifter and slower, but time is not. For the slow and the swift are defined by time, since that is swift which is much moved in a short time, and that is slow which is but a little moved in a long time. But time is not defined by time, neither because it is a certain quantity, nor because it is a certain quality. It is evident, therefore, that time is not motion. But there is no difference whether at present we say it is not motion, or that it is not mutation. Chapter 16. Neither, however, is time without mutation. For when there is no change in our thoughts, or if there is, but we are ignorant of it, then it does not appear to us that any time has elapsed, as neither did it to those in Sardis, who are fabled to have slept with the heroes when they awoke. For they conjoined the prior with the posterior now, and made them to be one, not taking into account the intermediate time, through not having had a sensible perception of it. As, therefore, if there were no other now, but one and the same, there would be no time. Thus also, when it is concealed from us that there is a different time, then the intermediate time does not appear to exist. If, therefore, it then happens to us that we do not imagine there is time when we do not distinguish any mutation, but the soul appears to remain in one and an indivisible, but when we sensibly perceive and distinguish mutation, then we say there has been time. If this be the case, it is evident that time is not without motion and mutation. But since we investigate what time is, let us assume, beginning from hence, what it is belonging to motion. For together with motion we have also a sensible perception of time. For even in darkness, and when we are passive to nothing through the body, if there is nevertheless a certain motion in the soul, there immediately also appears to have been some time. But when likewise some time appears to have elapsed together with this, there seems also to have been some motion. So that time is either motion, or something belonging to motion. Since, therefore, it is not motion, it is necessary that it should be something belonging to motion. But since that which is moved from something to something, and since all magnitude is continuous, motion is consequent to magnitude. For because magnitude is continuous, motion also is continuous, and because motion, also time, for as much motion as there was, so much time likewise always appears to have elapsed. But prior and posterior primarily subsist in place, and here indeed in the position of the parts. Since, however, there are prior and posterior in magnitude, it is also necessary that these should be in motion, analogous to the prior and posterior which are there. Moreover, there are also prior and posterior in time, because one of these is always consequent to the other. But the prior and posterior of these do not in reality differ from motion, but only in essence and definition. We likewise know time when we give a boundary to motion, distinguishing prior and posterior, and we then say there has been time when we receive a sensible perception of prior and posterior in motion. But we distinguish them by apprehending these to be another and another, and also by conceiving that there is something between, different from these. For when we understand that the extremes are different from the middle, and the soul says that there are two instants, the one prior and the other posterior, then we say that this is time, for that which is bounded by instants appears to be time. And let this be admitted. When, therefore, we have a sensible perception of the now as one, and there is not anything as prior and posterior in motion, or when we perceive it as the same, and not belonging to a certain prior and posterior, then there does not appear to have been any time, because neither was there any motion. But when we perceive prior and posterior, then we say there is time. For time is this, the number of motion according to prior and posterior. Time, therefore, is not motion, unless so far as motion has number, an indication of which is this, that we judge of the more and the less by number, but of a greater and less motion by time. Time, therefore, is a certain number. Since, however, number is twofold, for we call both that which is numbered, and that which is numerable, number, and also that by which we number, time is that which is numbered, and not that by which we number. But that by which we number is different from that which is numbered. Chapter 17. And as there is always another and another motion, so likewise with respect to time. But the whole of time, considered as subsisting at once, is the same. For the now is in reality one and the same, but its essence is different. The now, however, measures time so far as it is prior and posterior. The now also subsists as partly the same and partly not the same, for so far as it is in another and another, it is different, but this was the now itself. But so far as the now is that which it once was, so far it is the same. For, as we have said, motion is consequent to magnitude, and time to motion. In a similar manner also, that which is borne along is consequent to a point, by which we recognize motion, and the prior and posterior in it. But this is in reality the same, for it is either a point, or a stone, or something else of this kind, but is different in definition, just as the sophists assume that Coriscus in the Lyceum is different from Coriscus in the Forum, and this also is different because it is in a different and a different place. But the now is consequent to that which is borne along, in the same manner as time to motion. For by that which is borne along we know prior and posterior in motion, but the now is, so far as prior and posterior are numerable. So that in these a real instant is the same, for that which is in motion is either prior or posterior, but the essence is different, because the now is, so far as prior and posterior are numerable. And this is especially known, for motion is known through that which is moved, and lation through that which is borne along. For that which is borne along is this particular thing, but this is not the case with motion. That which is called the now, therefore, is partly the same and partly not the same, for the like also may be said of that which is borne along. But it is also evident that whether time is not, there will not be the now, or whether the now is not, time will not be. For as that which is borne along and lation subsist together, so likewise the number of that which is borne along, and the number of the lation. For time is the number of lation, but the now, with respect to that which is borne along, is as the monad to number. Time also is continued through the now, and is divided according to the now. For according to this, time and the now are consequent to lation, and the thing which is borne along. For motion and lation are one with that which is borne along, because it is one, and not according to that which is, for it may fail, but also in definition. And this bounds prior and posterior motion. According to this also, it is in a certain respect consequent to a point. For a point also, in a certain respect, connects and bounds length, since it is the beginning of one length and the end of another. When, however, any one thus considers it, using one point as if it were two, it is necessary to stop if the same point will be the beginning and end. But the now, because that which is borne along is moved, is always different. Hence, time is a number not as of the same point, because it is both beginning and end, but rather as the extremities of a line, and not as parts, for the reason already assigned. For it uses the middle point as 2 points, whence it happens that it rests. And further still, it is evident that neither is the now a part of time, nor division a part of motion, as neither are points parts of a line, but two lines are parts of one line. So far, therefore, as the now is a boundary, it is not time, but an accident of time, but so far as it numbers, it is number. For boundaries belong to that only of which they are the boundaries. But the number which is of these horses, as for instance the decad, has also a subsistence elsewhere. Chapter 18. That time, therefore, is the number of motion according to prior and posterior, and that it is continued, for it is of the continuous, is evident. The least number, however, simply considered, is the duad. But a certain number is partly the least and partly not. As, for instance, of a line, the least number is in multitude 2, or 1. But there is not a least in magnitude, for every line is always divisible. Hence also, similarly, time. For 1 or 2 is the least according to number, but is not according to magnitude. It is also evident why time is not said to be swift and slow, but much and few, and long and short. For so far as it is continued, it is long and short, but so far as it is number, it is much and few. It is not, however, swift and slow, for neither is any number with which we numerate swift and slow. The same time also is everywhere at once. But prior and posterior are not the same, because with respect to mutation, the present indeed is one, but the past and future are different. But time is number, not that with which we numerate, but that which is numbered, and this happens according to prior and posterior to be always different, for the instants are different. The number is also one and the same of 100 horses, and 100 men. But the things to which the number belongs are different, viz., the horses and the men. Further still, as it happens that motion is one and the same again and again, so also it happens with respect to time, as for instance the year, the spring, or the autumn. We not only, however, measure motion by time, but time by motion, because they are bounded by each other. For time bounds motion, since it is the number of it, and motion bounds time. And we say that time is much or few, measuring it by motion, in the same manner as we measure number by that which is numerable, as for instance, by one horse the number of horses. For by number we know the multitude of horses, and again by one horse we know the number of the horses. The like also happens in time and motion, for by time we measure motion, and by motion time. And this happens reasonably, for motion is consequent to magnitude, and time to motion, because these are quantities, and are continuous and divisible. For because the magnitude is such, the motion suffers these things, and time because of the motion. And we measure magnitude by motion, and motion by magnitude. For we say that the way is long if the journey is long, and that this is long if the way is long. We also say that the time is long if the motion is much, and that the motion is much if the time is long. Chapter 19. Since, however, time is the measure of motion and of being moved, and it measures motion by giving a definite extent to a certain motion which measures the whole, just as a yard measures length by giving a definite extent to a certain magnitude which measures the whole. This being the case, for motion to be in time is nothing else than for time to measure it and its essence, for at the same time it measures motion, and the essence of motion. And this it is for motion to be in time, viz. For time to measure its essence. But it is evident that this it is also for other things to be in time, viz. For their essence to be measured by time. For to have a subsistence in time is one of two things, one of which is, then, to be when time is, and the other, just as we say that certain things are in number. And this signifies either as a part and property of number, and in short, that it is something belonging to number, or that it is the number of it. But since time is number, the now, the prior, and things of this kind are so in time, as the monad, the even, and the odd are in number. For these are something belonging to number, and those are something belonging to time, but things are in time as in number. If this, then, is the case, things are comprehended by number in the same manner as things in place are comprehended by place. It is also evident that to be in time is not then to be when time is, as neither to be in motion, nor to be in place is then to be when motion and place are. For if a subsistence in anything were of this kind, all things would be in anything whatever, and heaven would be in a grain of millet. For where a grain of millet is, the heaven also is, but this is an accidental circumstance. That, however, necessarily follows, viz., that to a thing which is in time there is a certain time when that thing is, and that to a thing in motion there is then motion. But since that which is in time is as in number, a certain time may be assumed greater than everything which is in time. Hence it is necessary that all things which are in time should be comprehended by time, just as other things which are comprehended in anything, as for instance that which is in place by place. Hence that which is in time will suffer something from time, just as we are accustomed to say that time consumes, that all things grow old from time, and are forgotten through time, but nothing learns, nor becomes young, nor beautiful through time. For time is of itself rather the cause of corruption, because it is the number of motion, and motion removes that which exists from its state or condition. So that it is evident that eternal beings, so far as they are eternal, are not in time, for they are not comprehended by time, nor is their being measured by time. As a token of the truth of this, they do not suffer anything by, as not being in time. But since time is the measure of motion, it is also the measure of rest according to accident. For all rest is in time. For it does not follow that as that which is in motion must necessarily be moved, so also that which is in time, since time is not motion, but the number of motion. But in the number of motion there may also be that which is at rest. For not everything immovable is at rest, but that is at rest which is deprived of motion when it is naturally adapted to be moved, as we have before observed. But to be in number is nothing else than to be some number of a thing, and to have its being measured by the number in which it is, so that if a thing is in time, its essence is measured by time. But time measures both that which is in motion and that which is at rest, so far as the former is in motion and the latter at rest. For it measures the quantity of their motion and rest, so that what is in motion will not simply be measured by time, so far as it is a certain quantity, but so far as its motion is so much. Hence such things as are neither in motion nor at rest are not in time, since to be in time is to be measured by time, and time is the measure of motion and rest. It is evident, therefore, that neither is everything which is not in time, as, for instance, such things as cannot subsist otherwise, as that the diameter of a square should be commensurate with its side. For, in short, if time is essentially the measure of motion, but of other things according to accident, it is evident that the essence of all such things as time measures consists in being at rest, or in motion. Whatever, therefore, is corrupted and generated, and in short at one time is, and at another time is not, is necessarily in time. For there is a certain greater time which exceeds their essence, and the time that measures their essence. But of things which are not, such as time comprehends, partly have been, as Homer once was, and partly will be, as is the case with anything future. These time comprehends on both sides, and if on both sides they were and will be. But such things as time does not at all comprehend, these neither were, nor are, nor will be, and of this kind are those non-beings, the opposites of which always are. Thus that the diameter of a square is incommensurable with its side always is, and this will not be in time. Neither, therefore, will it be in time for it to be commensurable. Hence it always is not, because it is contrary to that which always is. But those things the contrary to which is not always, these may both be and not be, and of these there is generation and corruption. Again, the now is the conjunction of time, as has been observed, for it connects the time past and future, and in short is the boundary of time. For it is the beginning of one time and the end of another, though this is evidently not as in an abiding point. But it divides in capacity, and the now, so far as it is such, is always different, but so far as it connects, it is always the same, just as in mathematical lines. For there is not always one and the same point in intellectual conception, because to those who divide there is always another and another. But so far as it is one line, there is entirely the same point. Thus also the now is partly a division of time according to capacity, and partly the boundary and union of both. Division, too, and union are the same and according to the same, but their essence is not the same. In this manner, therefore, one of the nows is said to be, but another now is said to be when the time belonging to this now is near. For some one came now because he came today, or he came now because he came yesterday. But the Trojan transactions are not performed now, nor does a deluge take place now, though time is continued as far as to those events, because they are not near. The once, however, is time bounded with reference to a former now, as for instance Troy was once captured, and once there will be a deluge, for it is necessary to be bounded with reference to the now. There will therefore be a certain quantity from this time as far as to that, and it was with reference to the past. But if there is no time which has not connection with the once, every time will be finite. Will time, therefore, fail, or will it not, since motion always is? Will there then be a different time, or the same time frequently? It is manifest that as is motion, so also is time. For if one and the same motion is once produced, there will be one and the same time. But if not, there will not be. But since the now is the end and beginning of time, yet not of the same time, but is the end of the past and the beginning of the future, this being the case, just as a circle in a certain respect contains in the same the convex and the concave, thus also time always is in the beginning and end, and on this account it always appears to be different, for the now is not the beginning and end of the same time, since if this were the case, opposites would subsist together, and according to the same. Hence time will not fail, for it is always in the beginning, but the presently, or just now, is that which is near to the present indivisible now, since it is a part of the future time. For instance, when will you walk? Presently, because the time is near in which this will come to pass, and the past time in which it happened is not remote from the present now. For instance, when will you walk? I have already just now walked. But we do not say that Troy was just now captured, because the time when this happened is very remote from the present now. The lately also is near the present now, and is a part of the past time. For instance, when did you come? Lately is the answer, if the time was near to the present now. The formerly is remote time, and the suddenly is asserted of that which is removed from its condition, in a time which is insensible through its smallness. But all mutation naturally possesses the power of altering the condition of a thing, and all things are generated and corrupted in time. Hence some have called time the wisest of things, but the Pythagorean Paran, speaking more accurately, calls it most unwise, because things are forgotten in it. It is evident, therefore, that time of itself is rather the cause of corruption than generation, as we have observed before. For mutation possesses from itself a power of removing a thing from its condition, but is the cause of generation and being according to accident. As a sufficient token of this, nothing is generated without itself in a certain respect moving and acting, but a thing may be corrupted which is not at all moved, and this corruption we are accustomed especially to ascribe to time. Time, however, does not produce this, but it happens that this mutation is effected in time. We have shown, therefore, that time is, and what it is, and in how many ways we speak of the now, and what the once is, the lately, the just now, the formerly, and the suddenly. Chapter 20. These things, therefore, being thus enumerated by us, it is evident that every mutation is necessarily made in time, and that everything which is moved in time, for the swifter and the slower are in all mutation, since in all things this is apparent. But I say that a thing is moved swifter, which prior to something else changed into a subject, being moved according to the same interval, and with an equable motion, as for instance in lation, if both are moved in a circumference, or both in a right line. The like also takes place in other things. The prior also is in time, for we speak of the prior and posterior according to distance, with reference to the present now. But the present now is the boundary of the past and future time, so that since nows are in time prior and posterior also will be in time. For in that in which the now is, in that also is the distance from the now. But the prior is spoken of in a contrary manner according to the time past and future. For in the time past we call that prior which is more remote from the present now, but we call that posterior which is nearer to it. But in the future that is prior which is nearer, and that is posterior which is more remote. Hence, since the prior is in time, but the prior is consequent to all motion, it is evident that all mutation and all motion are in time. It deserves also to be considered how time subsists with reference to soul, and why time appears to be in everything, in the earth, in the sea, and in the heavens. Shall we say it is because time is a certain passive quality or habit of motion, since it is the number of it? But all these things are movable, for all these are in place, and time and motion subsist together, both according to capacity and according to energy. It may, however, be doubted whether, if soul were not, time would be or not. For when it is impossible for that which numerates to be, it is also impossible that there should be anything numerable. So that it is manifest that neither can there be number, for number is either that which is numbered, or that which is numerable. However, if nothing else than soul and the intellect of soul are naturally adapted to numerate, it is impossible for time to be when soul is not, unless time is that which is in reality and in a subject. As, for instance, it may be doubted if it be possible for motion to be without soul. But prior and posterior are in motion, and time is these so far as they are numerable. It may also be doubted of what kind of motion time is the number, or whether it is the number of every kind of motion. For a thing is generated, corrupted, increased, changed in quality, and borne along in time. So far, therefore, as each of these is motion, time is the number of every motion. Hence it is simply the number of continued motion, and not of a certain motion. But it is possible that something else may be now moved, of the motion of each of which there will be a number. Will there then be a different time, and will there be at once two equal times, or will there not? For all time is one, similar, and at once, but things are one in species which do not subsist at the same time. For if these should be dogs, but those horses, and both should be 7, there will be the same number. Thus also there is the same time of motions which are finished together, but the one is perhaps swift, and the other not, and the one lation, but the other change according to quality. Time, however, is the same, since the number is equal and subsists at once, both of the change according to quality and the lation. Hence the motions are different and separate, but time is everywhere the same, because the number is one, and everywhere the same of things equal and which subsist at once. But since there is lation, and motion in a circle belongs to this, and since everything is numbered by a certain kindred one, as monads by the monad, and horses by a horse, this being the case, time also is numbered by a certain definite time. But time, as we have said, is measured by motion, and motion by time, and this is because the quantity both of motion and time is measured by a definite motion in time. If, therefore, that which is first is the measure of all kindred natures, equable circulation will be especially a measure, because the number of this is most known. Change according to quality, therefore, increase and generation are not equable, but lation is equable. Hence time appears to be the motion of the celestial sphere, because other motions and time itself are measured by this motion. Hence, too, that happens which is usually said, for they say that human affairs are a circle, and also that the generation and lation of other things which have a natural motion is circular. And this is because all these things are judged of by time, and receive an end and beginning, as it were, according to a certain period. For time itself appears to be a certain circle, and this again appears to be so, because time is the measure of a lation of this kind, and is itself measured by such a lation. So that to say that things generated are a circle is nothing more than to say that there is a certain circle of time, and this because time is measured by circulation. For except that which measures, the whole of that which is measured appears to be nothing else than many measures. It is also rightly said that the number is the same of sheep and dogs, if each number is equal, but there is not the same decad, nor the same tens, as neither are the equilateral and the scalene the same triangles, though the figure is the same, because both are triangles. For that is said to be the same by the difference of which it does not differ, but not that by the difference of which it differs. Thus, for instance, triangle differs by the difference of triangle, and hence there are different triangles. But figure does not differ by the difference of figure, but is in one and the same division. For a figure of such a nature is a circle, and such a figure is a triangle. And of this, that which is of such a nature is equilateral, but that which is of a different nature is scalene. Hence this, indeed, is the same figure, for it is a triangle, but the triangle is not the same. The number also is the same, for the number of these does not differ by the difference of number. But the decad is not the same, for the things of which it is said to be the decad differ, since some of these are dogs, and others horses. And thus much concerning time, as well itself as the things which pertain to, and are peculiar to, the consideration of it. End of Book 4. Chapter 1 of Book 5. Everything, however, which is changed partly from accident, as when we say that what is musical walks, because that walks to which the being musical is an accident, and partly because something belonging to this is changed. It is simply said to be changed, as, for instance, such things as are said to be changed according to parts. For the body is healed because the eye or the breast is healed, and these are parts of the whole body. But there is something which is neither moved according to accident, nor because something else of it is moved, but because it is itself first moved, and this is that which is moved by itself. According to a different motion, however, there is a different subject, as, for instance, that which is changed according to quality, and the subject of change according to quality, which may be healed or heated, is different. The like also takes place in that which moves. For one thing moves according to accident, but another according to a part, because some one of its parts move, and another by itself primarily, as, for instance, the physician heals, and the hand strikes. But since there is something which first moves, and there is also something which is moved, and, farther still, time in which it is moved, and, besides these, that from which and that into which it is moved, for all motion is from something and into something, since that is different which is first moved, and into which and from which it is moved, as, for instance, wood, the hot and the cold. But of these, one is that which, another into which, and another from which. Since this is the case, it is evident that motion is in the wood, and not in the form, for neither form, nor place, nor any definite quantity either moves or is moved. But there is that which moves, and that which is moved, and that into which it is moved. For mutation is more denominated from that into which than from that from which it is moved. And on this account corruption is a mutation into non-being, though also that which is corrupted is changed from being, and generation is a mutation into being, though it should be from non-being. What motion therefore is, has been shown before. But forms, passive qualities, and the place into which things that are moved, are things immovable, such, for instance, as science and heat. Some one, however, may doubt whether passive qualities are motions, and whiteness a passive quality, for in this case there will be a mutation into motion. But perhaps not whiteness is motion, but the becoming white. In those also there is a subsistence according to accident, according to a part, according to another, and primarily, and not according to another. Thus that which is whitened is changed into that which is intellectually apprehended according to accident. For it happens to colour to be intellectually perceived, but it is changed into colour because the white is a part of colour. It is also changed in Europe because Athens is a part of Europe, but it is changed into a white colour essentially. Hence it is manifest how a thing is moved essentially, how according to accident, and how according to something else; likewise how the same thing is first, as well in that which moves as in that which is moved, and also that motion is not in form, but in that which is moved and is movable in energy. The mutation, therefore, which subsists according to accident we shall omit, for it is in all things, and always, and of all things. But that which is not according to accident is not in all things, but in contraries, in things which have an intermediate subsistence, and in contradiction, the truth of which is confirmed by induction. But from that which has an intermediate subsistence a thing is changed, as from a contrary, for it uses it as that which is contrary to each extreme. For that which has an intermediate subsistence is in a certain respect the extremes. Hence this compared to those, and those to this, are said to be in a certain respect contraries. Thus the middle chord compared to the nete is flat, and is sharp compared to the hypate. Thus also the dark brown compared to the black is white, and compared to the white is black. Chapter 2. Since, however, all mutation is from something into something, but this is evident from the name, for it denotes something after another, and the one signifies prior, but the other posterior. Hence that which is changed may be changed in a fourfold respect, for it may be changed either from a subject into a subject, or from a non-subject into a non-subject, or from a non-subject into a subject, or from a subject into a non-subject. But I call the subject that which is rendered manifest by affirmation. Hence it is necessary, from what has been said, that there should be three mutations: that which is from a subject into a subject, that which is from a subject into a non-subject, and that which is from a non-subject into a subject. For that which is from a non-subject into a non-subject is not mutation, because it is not according to opposition, since they are neither contraries, nor is there contradiction. The mutation, therefore, which is from a non-subject into a subject according to contradiction is generation. The simple, indeed, that which simply is, but a certain mutation, that which is of a certain thing. Thus the mutation which is from non-white into white is the generation of white. But the mutation from non-being simply into essence is generation simply, according to which we say a thing is simply generated, and is not generated some particular thing. But the mutation from a subject into a non-subject is corruption, simply indeed the mutation from essence into non-being, but a certain mutation, that which is into the opposite negation, as was also said in generation. If, therefore, non-being is predicated multifariously, and neither that which is according to composition or division can be moved, nor that which is according to capacity, which is opposed to being simply considered according to energy (for that which is not white or not good may at the same time be moved according to accident, since that which is not white may be man, but that which is simply not this particular thing can by no means be moved, since it is impossible for that which is not to be moved), if this be the case, it is also impossible for generation to be motion, because that is generated which is not. For though it should be especially generated according to accident, yet at the same time of that which is simply in generation, or becoming to be, it is true to say that it is non-being. In a similar manner also with respect to being at rest. But all these absurdities happen from admitting that non-being is moved. And if everything which is moved is in place, but non-being is not in place, for it would be somewhere, hence neither is corruption motion, for either motion or rest is contrary to motion, but corruption is contrary to generation. Since, however, all motion is a certain mutation, and there are three mutations, which we have enumerated, but of these the mutations according to generation and corruption are not motions, and these are those which subsist according to contradiction, this being the case, it is necessary that the mutation which is from a subject into a subject should alone be motion. But the subjects are either contraries, or have an intermediate subsistence. For privation is supposed to be a contrary, and it is manifested by affirmation, as the naked, the white, and the black. Chapter 3. If, therefore, the categories are divided by essence or substance, quality, the where, relation, and quantity, action and passion, it is necessary that there should be three motions, that which is of quantity, that which is of quality, and that which is according to place. But there is not motion according to essence, because nothing among beings is contrary to essence. Neither is there motion in relation, because it is possible that one of the relatives being changed, the other may be truly predicated, though in no respect changed, so that the motion of these is according to accident. Neither, therefore, is motion of agent and patient, nor of anything moved and moving, because there is not motion of motion, nor generation of generation, nor, in short, mutation of mutation. For, in the first place, there may be a motion of motion in a twofold respect, either as of a subject, as, for instance, a man is moved because he is changed from white into black. Is motion, therefore, thus heated or refrigerated, or does it change its place, or is it increased or diminished? But this is impossible, because mutation is not any subject. Or there may be a motion of motion, because some other subject is changed from the mutation into another form, as for instance a man from disease into health. But neither is this possible except according to accident, for this motion is a mutation from one form into another. And in a similar manner, generation and corruption, except that these mutations are thus into opposites. But this is not the case with motion. At the same time, therefore, he is changed from health into disease, and from this very mutation into another. It is manifest, however, that when he is diseased, he will now have been changed into a certain disease, for he may rest or remain in that disease. Besides, he who is moved to disease is not always moved to any casual motion, and that from some one to some other, so that the motion will be opposite, viz., the becoming well, but this because it so happened, just as if from reminiscence he should be changed into oblivion, because that in which these are inherent is changed, at one time into science, and at another into health. Farther still, there would be a progression to infinity, if there should be a mutation of mutation, and generation of generation. It is necessary, therefore, that the former should be, if the latter will be. Thus, if simple generation should at any time be generated, that also which is generated will be generated. Hence, that which was simply generated was not yet, but there was something which was generated, and which is now generated, and this again was once generated. Hence, that which was then generated was not yet. Since, however, there is not anything first in infinites, there will not be that which was first generated, so that neither will that be which is consequent to this. Neither, therefore, is it possible for anything to be generated, or moved, or changed. Again, contrary motion is of the same thing, and likewise rest, generation, and corruption. Hence, that which is generated is then corrupted when it becomes that which is generated. For neither immediately when it is generated is it then corrupted, nor afterwards, since it is necessary that what is corrupted should have a subsistence. Farther still, it is necessary that matter should subsist under that which is in generation or becoming to be, and under that which is changing. What then will it be? As that which is changed in quality is either body or soul, so that which is becoming to be is either motion or generation. And again, what is that into which it is moved? For it is necessary that there should be motion and generation of this, from this into this. At the same time, however, how will it be? For the generation of discipline will not be discipline, so that neither will there be generation of generation, nor a certain generation of a certain generation. Again, if there are three species of motion, it is necessary that some one of these should be the subject nature, and to which they are moved. Thus it is necessary that lation should be changed in quality, or borne along. In short, since everything which is moved in three ways, viz., either according to accident, or according to a part, or from itself, mutation can alone be changed according to accident, as if he who is restored to health should run or learn. Mutation, however, according to accident, we have already omitted. But since motion neither belongs to substance or essence, nor to relation, nor to action and passion, it remains that it alone subsists according to quality, quantity, and situation. For in each of these there is contrariety. Let therefore the motion which subsists according to quality be alliation, for this common name is adapted to it. But I mean by quality not that which is in essence, for difference also is quality, but that which is passive, according to which it is said to suffer, or to be impassive. But the motion according to quantity, with respect to a common name, is anonymous, but when it is divided into two species, it is increase and diminution, the increase which tends to the perfect being magnitude, but that which is from this diminution. And the motion according to place, with respect to the peculiar and the common, is anonymous, but let it be called in common lation, though those things alone are properly said to be borne along, which, when they change their place, cannot of themselves stop, and which do not move themselves according to place. But the change to the more and the less in the same form is alliation. For motion is from the contrary to the contrary, either simply or in a certain respect. For the alliation which proceeds to the less is said to be changed into the contrary, but that which proceeds to the more is moved as from the contrary to it. But it is of no consequence whether it is in a certain respect changed, or simply, except that it is necessary that the terms should be contrary. But it is more and less, because more or less of the contrary is inherent, and is not inherent. That there are these three motions alone, therefore, is from these things manifest. Chapter 4. But that is immovable which is entirely incapable of being moved, just as sound is invisible, and also that which is scarcely moved in a long time, or which begins to be moved slowly, and which is called difficult to be moved. That likewise is immovable which is naturally adapted and able to be moved, but is not then moved when it is naturally adapted, and where, and as it is naturally adapted, which alone among things immovable I denominate to be at rest. For rest is contrary to motion, so that it will be a privation of that motion of which it is capable. What motion therefore is, and also rest, how many mutations there are, and what kind of mutations are motions, is evident from what has been said. Chapter 5. In the next place, let us show what the subsistence together, or at once, to ama, and separately, is; also what to touch is, and to have an intermediate subsistence; and what the successive is, the adhering and the continuous; and in what things each of these is naturally adapted to subsist. Such things, therefore, are said to subsist together, or at once according to place, as are in one place primarily; but things subsist separately which are in different places. Those things are said to touch each other, the extremities of which are together. But that has an intermediate subsistence to which the thing that is changed is naturally adapted to arrive, before it comes to the extreme into which it is changed, when it is continually changed according to nature. The least intermediate subsistence, however, is in three things. For the contrary is the extremity of mutation, but that is continually moved which intermits nothing, or the smallest portion of the thing, but not of time. For nothing hinders but that an intermission taking place, and immediately after the hypate, or the highest chord, the neate, or lowest chord, may sound. This, however, is an intermission of the thing in which motion is produced, and this is evident in mutations according to place, and in other mutations; but the contrary according to place is that which is very much distant in a right line. For the smallest right line is bounded, and that which is bounded is a measure. That is successive between which, and that to which it is successive, there is nothing of the same genus, when it is alone after the beginning, either by position or nature, or is thus defined in some other way. I say, for instance, as a line or lines between a line, or the monad or monads between the monad, or a house between a house. Nothing, however, hinders but that something else may subsist between; for that which is successive to something, and is something posterior. For one is not successive to two, nor the first day of the month to the second, but the latter are successive to the former. But the adhering is said to be that which, being successive, touches. Since, however, all mutation is in opposites, and opposites are contraries, and things which subsist according to contradiction, and there is no medium of contradiction, it is evident that in contraries there will be that which has an intermediate subsistence. The continuous is something belonging to the cohering, but I say that the continuous is when the boundaries of things by which each touches the other become one and the same, and, as the name signifies, are held together. But this being determined, it is evident that the continuous is in those things from which one thing is naturally adapted to be produced according to contact, and so that what is connected may at length become one. Thus also the whole will be one, as for instance, either by a nail, or by glue, or by contact, or by natural conjunction. It is also evident that what is successive is first, for it is necessary that what touches should be successive, but not that everything which is successive should touch. Hence, also, in things which are prior by definition, there is the successive, as for instance in numbers, but there is not contact. And if a thing indeed is continuous, it is necessary that it should touch, but if it touches, it is not yet continuous, for it is not necessary that their extremes should be one if they subsist together, but if the extremes are one, it is necessary that they should subsist together, so that natural conjunction is last according to generation. For it is necessary to be in contact if the extremes are naturally conjoined, but not all things which are in contact are naturally connected. But it is manifest that in those things in which there is not contact, there is not natural conjunction. Hence, if the point and the monad have, as some say, a separate subsistence, it is not possible that the point and the monad should be the same. For with points contact is present, but with monads the successive, and with the former something may be intermediate, since every line subsists between points. But it is not necessary that there should be something intermediate with the latter, for nothing is intermediate between two and one. And thus we have shown what the subsisting separately and together is, also what it is to touch, and to have an intermediate subsistence, and what the successive is, the adhering and the continuous, and in what kind of things each of these subsists. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. But one motion is predicated in many ways, for the one is multifariously predicated. Motion, therefore, is one in genus according to the figures of category, for lation with all lation is one motion in genus, but change according to quality differs in genus from lation. And motion is one in species, when, being one in genus, it is also in an individual species. Thus there are differences of colour, and therefore denigration and dealbation differ in species. Hence every dealbation will be the same in species with every dealbation, and every denigration with every denigration, but not with every dealbation. On this account, dealbation is one motion in species with every dealbation. But if there are certain things which are at the same time both genera and species, it is manifest that there will be, in a certain respect, one motion in species, but simply that there will not be one in species, as for instance, discipline, if science is a species of hypolepsis, but the genus of the sciences. Some one, however, may doubt if there is one motion in species when the same thing is changed from the same to the same, as for instance, one point from this place to that, again and again. But if there is, circulation will be the same with rectilinear motion, and rolling with walking. Or is it determined that motion is different if that in which it is different in species? But the circular is different in species from the right-lined. Thus, therefore, there is one motion both in genus and species, but the motion is simply one, which is one in essence and in number. And what a motion of this kind is will be manifest from division, for there are three things in number, about which we say there is one motion, viz., that which, and in which, and when. I say that which, because it is necessary that there should be something which is moved, as for instance man or gold, and this must be moved in something, as in place, or in passive quality. There must also be when it is moved, for everything is moved in time. But of these, that motion is one in genus or in species is caused by the thing in which it is moved, but the coherence is the effect of time, and that it is simply one is produced by all these, for that in which the motion is ought to be one and an individual, as for instance form. And again, the when, as that the time should be one and uninterrupted. It is also necessary that the thing moved should be one, not according to accident, as when that which is white becomes black, and coriscus walks, and coriscus and that which is white are one, but according to accident. Nor according to that which is common, for two men may at the same time be cured by the same method of cure, for instance, of an ophthalmy. But this is not one motion simply, but one in species. Suppose, however, that Socrates is changed in quality according to the same species of change in quality, but in another time, and again in another. If then it is possible that what is corrupted may again become one in number, this motion also will be one. But if this is not possible, there will indeed be the same motion, but not one motion. There is also a doubt similar to this, whether there is one health essentially, and, in short, whether habits and passions are in essence in bodies, for the possessors of these appear to be moved and to flow. If, however, the health is one and the same which was in the morning and now is, why, when a man recovers the health which he had lost, is not this one and the same in number? For the reason is the same, except that it differs in this, that if two things are, on this account, as one in number, it is also necessary that habits should be one in number. For one energy in number is of one thing in number. But if habit is one, perhaps it may not yet appear to some one that there is also one energy. For when a man ceases to walk, there is no longer walking, but when he again walks, there will be walking. If, therefore, there is one and the same energy, one and the same thing may often perish, and often exist. These doubts, however, are foreign from the present speculation. But since all motion is continued, it is also necessary that the motion, which is simply one, should be continued, if all motion is divisible, and if it is continued, it is one. For not every motion can be continuous to every motion, as neither can anything else to anything else. But those things only are continued whose extremes are one. Extremes, however, do not belong to some things, but not to others, being different in species and homonymous. For how can the extremity of a line and of walking touch each other or become one? Motions, therefore, may be coherent, which are neither the same in species nor in genus. For some one who is running may immediately have a fever, and lation adheres like a lamp from succession, but is not continued. For it is admitted that the continued is that the extremes of which are one, so that motions adhere and are successive because time is continued, but they are continued because the extremes of both become one. Hence it is necessary that the motion, which is simply continued and one, should be the same in species, and of one thing, and in one time. In one time, indeed, that a cessation of motion may not intervene. For in a cessation of motion it is necessary to rest. Between many motions, therefore, and not one motion, there is rest, so that if any motion is stopped by permanency, it is neither one, nor a continued motion, but it is stopped if time intervenes. But that motion, which is not one in species, cannot be called one, though there should not be an intermission of time. For the time indeed is one, but the motion is different in species. For it is necessary that the motion, which is one, should also be one in species, but it is not necessary that this should be simply one. And thus we have shown what the motion is which is simply one. Farther still, the motion also is said to be one which is perfect, whether it be according to genus, or according to species, or according to essence, just as in other things the perfect and the whole are of one thing. Sometimes, however, though motion is imperfect, it is said to be one, if it be only continued. Again, after another manner, besides the modes which have been enumerated, the motion is said to be one which is equable. For the motion which is anomalous in a certain respect does not appear to be one, but rather that which is equable, as a right line, for the anomalous is divisible. They appear, however, to differ in the same manner as the more and the less. But in all motion there is either the equable or the anomalous, for it may be equably varied, and borne along in an equable space, as for instance in a circle or a right line, and the like also may be said concerning increase and diminution. But the difference of the inequability is at one time in that in which a thing is moved. For it is impossible that motion should be equable upon a magnitude which is not equable, as for instance the motion in a fractured or spiral line, or in any other magnitude, every part of which does not accord with every part. But at another time the inequability is neither in the where, nor in the when, nor in that to which the motion tends, but in the manner. For sometimes it is defined by swiftness and slowness. For that motion, the celerity of which is the same, is equable, but that of which the celerity is not the same is anomalous. Hence, swiftness and slowness are neither species nor differences of motion, because they are consequent to all motions which are different in species. Hence, neither do gravity and levity, which tend to the same thing, differ in species, as of earth to itself, or of fire to itself. Anomalous motion, therefore, is one because it is continued, but it is less one than equable motion, which indeed happens to fractured lation, but the less has always a mixture of the contrary. If, however, every motion which is one may be equable and not equable, motions which do not adhere according to species cannot be one and continued. For how can the motion be equable which is composed from change according to quality and lation? For it would be necessary that they should accord. Chapter 7. Again, it is requisite to define what kind of motion is contrary to motion, and after the same manner concerning permanency. But in the first place we must determine whether the motion which is from the same is contrary to that motion which is to the same, as for instance, whether the motion which is from health is contrary to that which tends to health, as appears to be the case with generation and corruption, or whether this is true of the motion which is from contraries, so that the motion which is from health is contrary to that which is from disease. Or if this is the case with the motion that tends to contraries, so that the motion tending to health is contrary to that which tends to disease, or if the motion from a contrary to a contrary is contrary to that from a contrary to a contrary, as for instance, if the motion from health to disease is contrary to the motion from disease to health. For it is necessary that there should either be one or many of these modes, since it is not possible otherwise to oppose. But the motion which is from a contrary is not contrary to that which tends to a contrary. Thus the motion from health is not contrary to the motion to disease, for it is one and the same. They have not, however, the same essence, as neither is it the same thing to be changed from health and to be changed into disease, nor is the motion from one contrary contrary to that which is from another. For at the same time it would happen that the motion would be from a contrary and to a contrary, or to that which is intermediate. Concerning this, however, we shall speak hereafter. But the being changed to a contrary may appear to be the cause of contrariety, rather than the being changed from a contrary, for the one is a liberation from, but the other an assumption of, contrariety. And every motion is denominated rather from that into which it is changed, than from that from which it is changed. Thus that is called a becoming well (ougiansis), which tends to health, but a becoming ill (nosansis), which tends to disease. There remains therefore the motion which is to contraries, and that which is to contraries from contraries. Perhaps, therefore, it happens that the motions which are to contraries are also from contraries, but their essence perhaps is not the same. I mean, for instance, the motion to health, when referred to that which is from disease, and the motion from health referred to that which tends to disease. But since mutation differs from motion, for the mutation from a certain subject to a certain subject is motion, this being the case, the motion which is from a contrary to a contrary is contrary to that which is from a contrary to a contrary. Thus the motion which is from health to disease is contrary to the motion from disease to health. But it is manifest from induction what kind of things those appear to be which are contraries. For to become diseased is contrary to the being made well, and to learn is contrary to the being deceived, not through oneself, since they tend to contraries. For as science, so likewise deception may be obtained both through oneself and through another. Lation upward also is contrary to that which is downward, for these are contrary in length. And the motion to the right hand is contrary to that which is to the left, for these are contrary in breadth. The motion, too, which tends to the anterior part is contrary to that which tends to the posterior part, for these are contrary in depth. But the tendency which is to a contrary alone is not motion, but mutation, such, for instance, as becoming to be white, but not from a certain thing. In things, however, to which there is not anything contrary, the mutation which is from the same is contrary to the mutation which is to the same. Hence generation is contrary to corruption, and rejection to assumption, but these are mutations and not motions. The motions, however, to that which has an intermediate subsistence, between which being contraries something intervenes, are to be considered in a certain respect as tending to contraries. For motion uses that which is intermediate as a contrary, into whichever part it may be changed. For instance, from a dark brown to white, as from black, and from white to a dark brown, as to black, but from black to a dark brown, as to white. For the dark brown, which is a medium, is in a certain respect referred to each of the extremes, as was before observed. Motion, therefore, is thus contrary to motion, viz. The motion from a contrary to a contrary is contrary to that from a contrary to a contrary. Chapter 8. Since, however, not only motion but rest seems to be contrary to motion, this must be determined. For motion is simply contrary to motion, but rest is also opposed, for it is privation, and privation in a certain respect is said to be contrary. But what kind to what kind? For instance, is local rest contrary to local motion? But this is now simply asserted. For whether is the motion which is from this, or the motion which is to this, opposed to the permanency which is in this? But it is evident, since motion is in two subjects, that the permanency which is in this is opposed to the motion which is from this to a contrary, and that the permanency which is in a contrary is opposed to the motion which is from a contrary into this. At the same time, however, these permanencies or abidings are contrary to each other. For it would be absurd, if motions are contrary, that the rests opposed to them should not also be contrary. But these rests and motions are in contrary terms. Thus the rest which is in health is opposed to the rest which is in disease, and to the motion from health to disease. For it is irrational to suppose that this rest is contrary to the motion which is from disease to health. For the motion to that in which it was established is rather arresting, so far as it happens to be at the same time produced with motion. But it is necessary that either this or that should take place. For the rest which is in whiteness is not contrary to the rest which is in health. But of such things as have not contraries, the mutation is indeed opposite, viz. The mutation from the same to the mutation to the same, but the motion is not. Thus the mutation from being is opposite to the mutation into being, and there is not a permanency of these, but immobility. And if indeed non-being were a certain subject, the immobility which is in being would be contrary to that which is in non-being. But if non-being is not anything, it may be doubted to what the immobility in being is contrary, and if it is rest. If, however, it be, either not all rest is contrary to motion, or generation and corruption will be motion. It is evident, therefore, that it must not be called rest, unless these also are called motions, but it must be denominated something similar, and immutability. But it is contrary either to nothing, or to that privation of mutation which is in non-being, or to corruption. For this is from that, but generation into that. Chapter 9. It may, however, be doubted why permanencies and motions are in the mutation according to place, both according to and contrary to nature, but are not in other mutations. Thus, with respect to change in quality, one kind is according to, and another contrary to nature. For a tendency to health is not more according to or contrary to nature than a tendency to disease, nor a tendency to whiteness than a tendency to blackness. The like also takes place in increase and diminution, for neither are these contrary to each other, as if by nature, or contrary to nature, nor increase to increase. And there is the same reasoning with respect to generation and corruption, for neither is generation according to nature, but corruption contrary to nature, since to grow old is according to nature. Nor do we see that generation is partly according and partly contrary to nature. If, however, that which is by violence is contrary to nature, the corruption which is violent will be contrary to that which is not violent, in the same manner as that which is contrary to that which is according to nature. There are therefore certain generations which are violent, and not fatal, to which those that are according to nature are contrary, and there are violent augmentations and diminutions, to which those according to nature are contrary, such as the augmentations of those who, through luxury, swiftly arrive at puberty, and corn which rapidly becomes ripe, and without constipation. But how does this take place in change according to quality? Shall we say after the same manner? For some of the changes will be violent, and others natural. Thus some are liberated from disease, not in critical days, and others in critical days, of whom the former are changed in quality contrary to, and the latter according to, nature. But corruptions will be contrary to each other, and not to generation alone. And what should hinder? For this takes place in a certain respect, viz. If the one is pleasant and the other painful, so that corruption is not simply contrary to corruption, but so far as one of them is of this kind and the other of that. In short, therefore, motions and rests are contrary in the manner we have mentioned, as for instance the upward to the downward, for these are contrarieties of place. But fire is naturally borne along by that lation which tends upward, and earth by that which tends downward, and these lations are contrary. But fire is carried upward naturally, and downward unnaturally, and its natural motion is contrary to that which is unnatural. And permanencies in a similar manner, for permanency above is contrary to the motion from above to below. This permanency, however, would be to the earth contrary to nature, and that motion would be to it according to nature, so that permanency is contrary to motion, viz. The permanency which is contrary to nature, to the motion which is according to nature of the same thing. For the motion of the same thing is thus contrary, for one of them will be according to nature, which is upward or downward, but the other contrary to nature. There is, however, a doubt whether there is a generation of all rest which has not a perpetual subsistence, and whether this is to stand still. Of the rest, therefore, which abides contrary to nature, as of the rest of earth when on high, there will be a generation. Hence earth, when it is violently driven on high, will stand still, but that which is capable of standing still always appears to be borne along swifter, but on the contrary, that which is moved by violence. Hence, not having been made quiescent, it will be quiescent. Again, to stand still seems to be properly asserted of that which is naturally borne along to its own place, i.e., it either seems to be wholly this, or at least it at the same time happens to be so. But there is a doubt whether the permanency which is here is contrary to the motion which is here, for when a thing is moved from this, or abandons rest, it still appears to possess that which is abandoned. So that if this rest is contrary to the motion which is from hence to the contrary, contraries will be at the same time inherent. Or will it, in a certain respect, be at rest, or will it still abide? And in short, that which is in motion is partly here, and partly in that into which it changes. Hence motion is more than rest contrary to motion. And thus, concerning motion and rest, we have shown how each is one, and what those motions and rests are, which are contrary to each other. Some one, however, may doubt concerning standing still, whether any rest is opposed to such motions as are contrary to nature. It is absurd, therefore, if there will not be, for it abides but by violence, so that there will be something at rest which is not always at rest without the generation of rest. But it is evident that there will be, for as some thing may be moved contrary to nature, so also it may be at rest contrary to nature. Since, however, to some things there is a motion according to, and contrary to nature, as to fire a motion upward is according to nature, but downward contrary to nature, whether is this contrary, or the motion of earth? For this is borne downwards according to nature. Or is it not evident that both these motions are contrary, yet not after the same manner, but the one as that which is according to nature, to that which is according to nature? But the upward to the downward motion of fire is as a motion according to a motion contrary to nature. The like also must be said respecting permanencies. And thus, concerning motion and rest, we have shown how each is one, and what those motions and rests are, which are contrary to each other. End of Book 5. Chapter 1 of Book 6. If, then, there is that which is continued, that which touches, and that which is successive, as was before defined, viz. That those things are continued whose extremes are one, that those touch whose extremes are together, and that those are successive between which there is nothing of the same kind. If this be the case, it is impossible that anything continuous should be composed from indivisibles, as for instance a line from points, since a line is a continued quantity, but a point is indivisible. For neither are the extremities of points one, since of that which is indivisible, one thing is not the extreme, and another some other part, nor do the extremes subsist together, for there is no extremity of that which is without parts. For the extremity is different from that of which it is the extremity. Farther still, it is necessary either that the points from which the continued quantity consists should be continued, or touch each other. The same reasoning also applies to all indivisibles. They will not, therefore, be continued for the reason already assigned. But everything touches either the whole, or a part, or a part the whole. Since, however, an indivisible is without parts, it is necessary that the whole should touch the whole. But the whole which touches the whole will not be continued, since the continued has different parts, and is divided into parts that are thus different and separated by place. Neither will a point be successive to a point, or the now to the now, so as that a length of time will consist from these. For things are successive between which there is nothing of the same kind, but between points there is always a line, and between nows time. Again, if this were the case, continued quantity might be divided into divisibles, since every thing may be divided into those things from which it consists, but nothing continued can be divided into impartibles. Nor can any other genus subsist between points and nows. For if this were possible, it is evident that it would be either divisible or indivisible, and if divisible, it will either be divisible into indivisibles, or into things always divisible. But this is something continued. It is also evident that everything which is continued is divisible into things always divisible. For if into indivisibles, the indivisible would be touched by the indivisible, since the extreme of things continued is one, and touches. But there is the same reasoning with respect to magnitude, time, and motion. For either each or no one of these consists from indivisibles, and is divided into indivisibles. And this is evident from the following considerations. For if magnitude were composed from indivisibles, the motion also through the space of this magnitude would be composed from equal indivisible motions. Thus, if the magnitude A, B, C were composed from the indivisibles A, B, C, the motion also D, E, F, with which O is moved through the interval A, B, C, will have each of its parts an indivisible. But if motion being present, it is necessary something should be moved. And if it is necessary that motion should be present if something is moved, if this be the case, to be moved also will consist of indivisibles. Hence O is moved through A when it is moved with the motion D, and through B with the motion E, and in like manner through G with the motion F. If, therefore, it is necessary that what is moved should be moved from one place to another, and not at the same time be moved and have been moved, whither it was moved when it was moved, just as if any one walks to Thebes, it is impossible that he should at the same time walk to Thebes and have walked to Thebes. If this be the case, O was moved through A, which is without parts, so far as the motion D was present to it. So that if it should pass after it has passed through, it will be divisible. For when it was passing through, it was neither at rest, nor had passed through, but was between both. But if at the same time it both passes through and had passed through, that which proceeds when it proceeds will be there, and will be moved to whither it is moved. And if anything should be moved through the whole length A, B, C, and the motion with which it is moved is D, E, F, But nothing moves, but has been moved through that which is without parts A. If this be admitted, motion will consist not from motions, but from the boundaries of motions (inemata), and something will have been moved which was not in motion, for it will have passed through A by not passing through it. Hence there will be something which has proceeded, though it has never at any time proceeded, for it has proceeded through this, not proceeding through it. If, therefore, it is necessary that everything should either be at rest or be in motion, but it is at rest in each of the parts A, B, C, there will be something which is at the same time continually at rest and continually moved, for it was moved through the whole magnitude A, B, C, and was at rest in every part of it, and therefore in the whole. And if the indivisible parts of D, E, F are motions, it is possible that when motion is present, a thing may not be moved, but be at rest. But if they are not motions, it will come to pass that motion is not composed from motions. In like manner, it is necessary that as length, so time should be indivisible, and be composed from nows, which are indivisible. For if all motion is divisible, but that which is equally swift passes through a less space in a less time, time also will be divisible. And if the time is divisible in which anything is borne along through A also will be divisible. But since every magnitude is divisible into magnitudes, for it has been shown that it is impossible for anything continued to be composed from indivisibles, and every magnitude is continued, it is necessary that what is swifter should pass through a greater space in an equal time, an equal space in a less time, and a greater in a less time, just as some define that which is swifter. For let A be swifter than B. Since, therefore, that which is first changed is more swift, hence in the time in which A is changed from C to D, as for instance in the time FG, in this time B will not have yet arrived at D, but will fall short of it, so that what is swifter will pass through more space in an equal time. In a less time also it will pass through more space than that which is slower. For in the time in which A arrives at D, B will arrive at E, since it is slower. Hence, because A arrived at D in the whole time FG, it will arrive at H in a less time than this, and it will arrive at it in the time FG. The space, therefore, CH, which A will pass through, is greater than CE, but the time FK is less than the whole time FG, so that it passes through a greater space in a less time. Hence also it is evident that what is swifter passes through an equal space in a less time, for since it passes through a greater length in a less time than that which is slower, but when considered itself by itself, it passes through a greater length in a less time, as for instance the length LM, which is greater than the length LX, hence the time PR in which it passes through the length LM is greater than the time PS in which it passes through the length LX. So that if the time PR is less than the time PT in which the slower movable quantity passes through the length LX, the time also PS is less than the time PT, for it is less than PR. But that which is less than the less is itself less, so that in a less time it will have moved through an equal space. Farther still, if it is necessary that everything in motion should be moved either in an equal, or in a less, or in a greater time, and that which is moved in a greater time is slower, in an equal time equally swift, and if that which is swifter is neither equally swift nor slower, if this be the case, that which is swifter is neither moved in an equal nor in a greater time. It remains, therefore, that it is moved in a less time. Hence it is necessary that the swifter should pass through an equal magnitude in a less time. But since every motion is in time, and in every time it is possible for something to be moved, but everything which is moved may be moved swifter and slower, hence in every time it is possible for a thing to be moved swifter and slower. But this being the case, it is necessary that time should be continued. And I call that continued which is divisible into parts that are always divisible. For the continued being admitted to be this, it is necessary that time should be continued. For since it has been shown that what is more swift passes through an equal space in a less time, let A be that which moves with a greater velocity, but B that which moves with a less. And let that which moves with a less velocity, or the slower, pass through the magnitude CD in the time FG. It is evident, therefore, that the swifter will pass through the same magnitude in a less time than this, and let this time be FH. Again, because the swifter passes through the whole length CD in the time FH, the slower in the same time will pass through a lesser length. Let this, therefore, be CK. But since the slower B passes through the length CK in the time FH, the swifter will pass through it in a less time, so that again the time FH will be divided. But this being divided, the magnitude also CK will be divided in the same ratio, and if the magnitude, also the time, and this will always be the case if we assume a progression from the swifter to the slower, and from the slower to the swifter, and make use of that which has been demonstrated, for the swifter divides the time, and the slower the length. If, therefore, conversion is always true, and division is always produced by conversion, it is evident that all time is continued. But at the same time it is also manifest that every magnitude is continued, for time and magnitude are divided according to the same and equal divisions. Again, from what is usually asserted, it is evident that if time is continued, magnitude is likewise, since in the half of a certain time the half of a certain space is passed through, and in short a less space in a less time, for there will be the same divisions of time and magnitude. And if the one is infinite, the other is also. As likewise is the one, so is the other. For instance, if time is infinite in the extremes, length also will be infinite in the extremes. And if time is infinite in division, this also will be the case with length. But if time is infinite in both these, length likewise will be infinite in both. Hence the reasoning of Zeno assumes that which is false, viz., that it is not possible to pass through infinites, or touch infinites one by one, in a finite time. For length and time, and in short everything continued, are said to be infinite in a twofold respect, viz., either according to division, or from the extremes. Things, therefore, that are infinite according to quantity cannot be touched in a finite time, but things according to division may, for time is thus infinite, so that it happens that the infinite may be passed through in an infinite and not in a finite time, and that infinites may touch infinites in infinite and not in finite times. Neither, therefore, can the infinite be passed through in a finite time, nor the finite in an infinite time. But if time is infinite, magnitude also will be infinite, and if magnitude, likewise time. For let there be a finite magnitude, A, B, and an infinite time, C. Let also some finite part of this time be assumed as C, D. In this time, therefore, it will pass through some part of the magnitude, and let it have passed through the part B, E. But this part will either measure the magnitude A, B, or will be deficient or exceed in measuring it. This, however, is of no consequence, for if it always passes through a magnitude equal to the part B, E, and this measures the whole magnitude, the whole time in which it passes through will be finite, for it will be divided into equal parts, as also the magnitude. Farther still, if it does not pass through the whole magnitude in an infinite time, but is able to pass through some portion of it in a finite time, as for instance the part B, E, and this measures the whole, if this be the case, it will pass through an equal part in an equal time, so that the time will be finite. But that it does not pass through the part B, E, in an infinite time, will be evident if a finite time is assumed from the other part. For if it passes through a part in a less time, it is necessary that this part should be finite, since the other boundary is present. There is the same demonstration if the length is supposed to be infinite, but the time finite. It is evident, therefore, from what has been said, that neither a line, nor a superficies, nor, in short, any continued quantity, is indivisible, not only in consequence of what has been now said, but because it will happen that an indivisible will be divided. For since in all time there is the swifter and the slower, but the swifter passes through a greater space in an equal time, it is possible for it to pass through a double or sesquialter length, for this may be the ratio of the celerity. Let that which moves swifter, then, pass through a sesquialter length in the same time, and let the magnitudes be divided, that which moves swifter into AB, BC, CD, 3 indivisibles, but that which moves slower into 2, EF, FG. The time, therefore, will also be divided into 3 indivisibles, for it passes through an equal space in an equal time. Let the time, then, be divided into KL, LM, MN. But again, since that which moves more slow passes through EF, FG, hence the time will be cut into 2 parts. An indivisible, therefore, will be divided, and that which is without parts will not pass through in an indivisible, but in a longer time. Hence it is evident that nothing continued is without parts. Chapter 2. But it is necessary that the now, which is so called, not through another, but by itself and primarily, should be indivisible, and likewise that such a now should be inherent in all time. For it is a certain extremity of the past, beyond which there is nothing of the future, and again it is a certain extremity of the future, beyond which there is nothing of the past. It is also that which we say is the boundary of both. And if it can be shown that the now is a thing of this kind in itself, and the same, it will at the same time be evident that it is indivisible. It is necessary, therefore, that the now should be the same which is the extremity of both times. For if it were different, the one would not be successive to the other, because that which is continued is not composed from impartibles. But if each is separate, there will be time between them. For everything continued is of such a kind that there is something synonymous between the extremes. If time, however, is that which is between, it will be divisible, for it has been shown that all time is divisible, so that the now will be divisible. But if the now is divisible, there will be something of the past in the future, and something of the future in the past. For that according to which it is divided will separate the present and future time. At the same time, however, the now will not be a boundary of itself, but through another. For the division is not of that which subsists by itself, to which we may add that of the now there will be something which will be past, and something which will be future, and not always the same past or future. Neither, therefore, is the now the same, for time is multifariously divisible, so that if these things cannot be inherent in the now, it is necessary that the same now should be in each. But if the same, it is also evident that it is indivisible. For if it were divisible, the same things would happen as have been already mentioned in the former argument. From what has been said, therefore, it is evident that there is something in time indivisible, which we say is the now. But that nothing is moved in the now is manifest from the following considerations. For if anything is so moved, it may be moved in it swifter and slower. Let the now, therefore, be N, and let that which is swifter be moved in it through the length A, B. Hence, that which is slower will be moved in the same through a length less than A, B, as for instance through A, C. But since that which is slower is moved in the whole now through A, C, that which is swifter will be moved in less than this, so that the now will be divided. But it was indivisible. It is not possible, therefore, for a thing to be moved in the now. But neither can a thing be at rest in the now, for we say that a thing is at rest which is naturally adapted to be moved, but is not moved when it is naturally adapted, and where and as it is naturally adapted to be moved. So that since nothing is naturally adapted to be moved in the now, it is evident that it possesses no natural aptitude to be at rest in the now. Again, if there is the same moment in both times, but it is possible to be moved in the whole of the one, and to be at rest in the whole of the other, and if that which is moved in the whole time may be moved in any part of this time in which it is naturally adapted to be moved, and that which is at rest may similarly be at rest, if this be the case, it will happen that the same thing may at the same time be at rest and be moved, for the same thing, that is, the now, is the extremity of both times. Farther still, we say that a thing is at rest which subsists similarly, both itself and its parts, now and formerly. But in the now there is not the prior, so that neither can anything be at rest in the now. It is necessary, therefore, that what is moved should be moved in time, and that what is at rest should be at rest in time. Chapter 3. But it is necessary that everything which is changed should be divisible. For since all mutation is from something to something, and when a thing is in that into which it is changed, it is no longer changed, but when it is in that from which it is changed, both itself and its parts are not yet changed. For that which subsists similarly is neither itself changed, nor its parts. This being the case, it is necessary that one part of that which is changed should be in this, but another part in the other. For neither is it possible that the whole can be in both, nor in neither. but I mean in that into which it is changed, viz. That which is first according to mutation, as for instance the dark brown from the white, and not the black. For it is not necessary that what is changed should be in either of the extremes. It is evident, therefore, that everything which is changed will be divisible. Chapter 4. But motion is divisible in a twofold respect. In one way by time, in another according to the motions of the parts of that which is moved. Thus, if the whole A, C is moved, the part also A, B will be moved, and the part B, C. Let therefore D, E be the motion of the part A, B, and E, F the motion of the part B, C. Hence it is necessary that the whole D, F should be the motion of A, C, for it will be moved according to this motion, since each of the parts is moved according to each, and nothing is moved according to the motion of another thing, so that the whole motion is the motion of the whole magnitude. Farther still, if all motion is the motion of something, but the whole motion D, F is neither the motion of either of the parts, for each part is the motion of each part, nor of anything else, for where there is a whole motion of the whole of a thing, the parts of that motion will be the motions of the parts of the thing, but the parts of the motion D, F are the motions of the parts A, B, C, and not of other things, for there is not one motion of many things. If this be the case, the whole motion will be the motion of the magnitude A, C. Besides, if there is another motion of the whole, as for instance H, I, the motion of each of the parts will be taken from it, but these will be equal to the motions D, E, E, F, for there is one motion of one thing, so that if the whole motion H, I is divided into the motions of the parts, the motion H, I will be equal to the motion D, F. But if anything remains, as for instance K, I, this will not be the motion of anything, for it will neither be the motion of the whole, nor of the parts, because there is one motion of one part, nor will it be the motion of anything else, because the motion of any continued quantities is continued. This also will be the case if it should surpass according to division, so that if this is impossible, it is necessary that it should be the same and equal. This, therefore, is the division according to the motions of the parts, and it is necessary that it should be the division of everything which consists of parts. But another division takes place according to time. For since all motion is in time, all time is divisible, and there is less motion in a less time. It is necessary that all motion should be divided according to time. Chapter 5. But since everything which is moved in something, and in a certain time, and since there is a motion of everything which is moved, it is necessary that there should be the same divisions of time and motion, of the being moved, and of that which is moved, and of that in which motion is effected, except that there is not similarly a division of all things in which motion is, but of quantity the division is essential, and of quality according to accident. For let the time in which anything is moved be A, and the motion B. If, therefore, it accomplishes the whole motion in the whole time, it will certainly effect a less motion in half the time, and this again being divided, it will effect a motion less than this, and thus perpetually. In like manner, if motion is divisible, time also is divisible. For if it accomplishes the whole motion in the whole time, it will accomplish half in half the time, and again less than half in less than half the time. After the same manner also, the being moved will be divided. For let the being moved be C. According to the half of the motion, therefore, it will be less than the whole, and again according to the half of the half, and thus perpetually. It is possible also, admitting the being moved to be according to each of the motions, as for instance according to D, C, and C, E, to say that the whole will be moved according to the whole motion. For if something else corresponds to the whole motion, there will be many things of which the being moved may be asserted according to the same motion, just as we have shown that motion is divisible into the motions of the parts. For if the being moved is assumed according to each motion, the whole will be continued. In a similar manner also it may be shown that length is divisible, and in short everything in which there is mutation, except that some things are divided according to accident, because that which is changed is divisible. For one part being divided, all the parts will be divided. And so far as pertains to their being finite or infinite, the thing will similarly take place in all of them. But it especially follows that all may be divided, and this to infinity, from that which is changed. For in that which is changed, the divisible and the infinite are immediately inherent. That the divisible indeed is inherent has been shown before, but that the infinite is also, will be manifest in what follows. Chapter 6. Since, however, everything that changes is changed from something into something, it is necessary that what is changed, when it is first changed, should be in that into which it is changed. For that which changes proceeds from that from which it changes, or leaves it, and either to change and to leave are the same, or the latter is consequent to the former, and the having left to the being changed, for each subsists similarly with reference to each. Since, therefore, of mutations one is that which is according to contradiction, when a thing is changed from non-being into being, it leaves non-being. It will be, therefore, in being, for it is necessary that everything should either be or not be. Hence it is evident that in the mutation according to contradiction, that which is changed will be in that into which it is changed. But if it is so in this mutation, it will likewise take place in others. For the thing is similar in one and in others. Again, this will be evident to those who consider the affair more particularly. If it is necessary that what is changed should be somewhere, or in something, for since it leaves that from which it is changed, and it is necessary that it should be somewhere, it will be either in this or in another. If, therefore, that which is changed into B is in another, as for instance in C, again it will change from C into B. For it did not adhere to B, because the mutation is continued, so that what is changed when it is changed changes into that into which it is changed. But this is impossible. Hence it is necessary that what is changed should be in that into which it is changed. It is evident, therefore, that what is made will then be when it is made, and that what is corrupted will not be when it is corrupted. For this has been universally asserted of every mutation, and is especially evident in the mutation according to contradiction. That what is changed, therefore, is, when it is first changed, in that into which it is changed, is evident. End of chapter 6 of book 6.